Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening and welcome to the Board of Commissioners meeting for August 17, 2009. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the public meeting of July 20, 2009. Do I have a motion?
Move to be approved.
Second.
Any comments?
Just my recollection might be a little. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. There is a correction in there. I forgot. I didn't have it in front of me. Diane Edbrells is who made the comments, not Eberly.
Yeah, we'll make that change.
Okay. Did we ever? There was a meeting. I thought it was the June meeting, and it was that last month where we didn't get minutes.
Correct. Yeah, we're working on those because there was
Okay.
some staff changes at the time, and we had.
Just wanted to make sure it didn't
they
get-
were impartial and incomplete minutes, so they'll be on for your next meeting.
Okay, that's it.
So we'll move to approve the minutes with the amendment suggested by Commissioner Higgins. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next is the notice of executive meeting. An executive meeting was held in the caucus room prior to the public meeting of August 17, 2009 to discuss real estate, litigation, and personnel matters. Next is the Wayne Business Association update.
Good evening. I'm Diane Jorley, President of the Wayne Business Association, and our next biggest event coming up is our 17th annual Radnor Fall Festival. And I brought with us some of the people from the committee, and Dr. Todd Surinsky from Westside Wellness is the chairman, so I'll bring him up to the podium to speak.
Good evening. We're very excited. This will be our first year in 17 events, and we're going to be having the event on North Wayne Avenue. Christopher Todd has met with gentlemen from the Township, with John Ruddy and Bill Hagan and Tom Blumstrom, and gotten some things organized. We have a parking map here. I was just going to show, if you'd like, to see where we're going to be having people park this year. It's always a concern. I don't know if that's in the right place there. The last few years, it's been at Philip Home Park on South Devon Avenue, and not much parking in that area. But it's worked out quite well. The issue is always where the exhibitors and sponsors will park. And I don't know if you're able to see that.
They're going to bring it up.
Okay. Okay, there you go. Yeah. So what we'd like to do this year is just have our table exhibitor and sponsors up on the top of the sheet there, right by the Radnor Fall Festival logo, is the North Wayne Park lot on the other side of the train station there. And we've been talking with Mr. Blumstrom about how many spots might be available there. But other than that, we're looking to sort of block the street at Route 30 up to West Avenue, as it was done for Jazz Fest. We've got a lot of nonprofits involved, and we've been working week after week to get everything scheduled for the event, and very excited to continue a good year.
And what's the date?
The date is September 20th, third Sunday, from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m.
Great.
Okay?
Any questions?
You guys good?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on that item? Is that it? Okay, thank you. Next is the departmental reports. Do I have a motion?
Move to be accepted.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I have a question. I don't know if it's better directed at Bill or Dan. I suspect it's better at Bill. The Department of Community Development Revenue Report. I can't quite see how that feeds into the year-to-date July general fund license and permits number.
Yeah, it depends when they ran that report. The number that in the budget report is the reconciled number as of the end of July.
Okay.
I mean, that number, I don't know when they ran that report on that, the community development report. It doesn't, I saw that doesn't jive with what,
Okay.
the actual number in your budget report is the actual revenues collected.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, they've been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is the committee reports. I have a motion. Second?
And then
Any
we're going through community development, right?
Pardon me?
No, we're doing on
We're doing committee reports right now.
Committee reports, move they be approved. Seconded.
All those in favor?
We're not, the community reports or the community, we start with community development.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right, community development.
That's Ms. Palina.
First item on the agenda is the execution of right-of-way agreement with Wawa. I will defer this to the solicitor to give us an update as to where he's at with the negotiations regarding the parties.
The board has in front of it the Wawa right-of-way temporary construction easement. This is related to the Five Points intersection and the joint road project with Lower Merion Township and Radnor. There's been some discussions with Wawa over the last year or so. Wawa has agreed to grant the right-of-way and the construction easement to the township, and the township will in turn, once the project's bid out and built, will convey this over to PennDOT. PennDOT's going to end up with this. The compensation for the easement is $43,000, and that's based on appraisals that were done out there. There's one other property owner next to Wawa that we're still talking to. We expect to have that right-of-way and easement hopefully for the next meeting. These are the only easements and rights-of-way that are needed in order for this job to be bid out. This has been held up for some period of time. Tonight, what's in front of you is the executed document from Wawa, an authorization to pay the compensation that's been negotiated to Wawa for the right-of-way. The other thing I'd point out on this is that the costs are being split. There's a joint agreement with Lower Merion Township and Radnor, so whatever the costs are for this, and then for the adjacent property owner, it'll be split between the two townships per that agreement.
Okay. Any questions?
Everybody okay? Okay, great. Thank you for the update, Mr. Rice. Next item on the agenda is the introduction of ordinance 2009-.
Can we,
We need a vote on this, don't we?
yeah, I would,
Do we have to vote on
yeah,
On-
Lisa,
the condemnation, or what are we
no,
voting?
on the authorization tonight is to authorize Mr. Masterson to execute the right-of-way agreement and to pay the value that's been negotiated that's in the agreement. So that's got to be authorized by the board tonight.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that Mr. Masterson be allowed to negotiate the right-of-way agreement with Wawa, and all the details thereto.
Is there a second?
Second. So he's being authorized to
Execute.
execute it, sign it.
Execute.
Right, that's what I wanted to make sure.
And can I just verify, you said 43,000, and are we splitting that cost with Lower Merion?
Yes.
Okay, so it's 21.5? Get that right?
Yes. Well, it'll
For
be
Wawa.
21.5, correct.
Yeah.
And then,
But it's Radnor's responsibility under that initial agreement that was executed to acquire the property first, and then you would get reimbursed, so I understand it, from Lower Merion. But ultimately, it's going to be half of that, John. Half of the 43 will be Radnor's share of that.
Okay, so our outlay is 43,000, but we expect to be reimbursed 21,500 from Lower Merion.
Correct.
okay, but you still, furthermore, in order to make this whole thing happen, have to consolidate the deal with MJ Test Prep, and that may require condemnation at this point.
It may, but I don't think it's going to require that. We met with them about a week ago.
Mm-hmm.
Since that meeting, Dan's been out on the property with, I don't know, Dan, did anybody from PennDOT walk that?
Pannoni came out with it.
Pannoni walked that, and Dan and I haven't talked tonight, but it's my understanding that there's some things that we need to clarify. They have a concern about their building. It's going to be closer to the road now once this is built. But I don't think there's any reason to believe we're not going to have an agreement from them by the next meeting. Do you, Dan?
That I told them when I met with them last week that was our goal, was to satisfy their concerns. So I am optimistic we will have something by then.
But we've got to do both of these. So this is the first piece of this, the more difficult piece, I think. If we don't have an agreement with MJ Test Prep, I would have to come back next month, and you would have to introduce a condemnation ordinance, which we had talked about with Wawa. And we worked out this with Wawa since we had that discussion at the last meeting. But I think we're going to be able to come to some agreement with them. They're looking for the same square footage compensation that Wawa is being paid. And there's a couple other things that we need to look at in terms of parking out there. But I would guess that we'll have another agreement at one of your meetings next month from them.
And what about the property owners on the other side of the street, the pizza owner, the other people who were being affected by the design of the intersection, who are going to lose ingress and egress?
Dan, you've been talking to those folks.
Yes, I have a drawing that I received when I met with the test prep people that Pannoni had supplied to me. I have a draft letter that I need you to look at to show to the owner of the pizza shop, to show how we've made the design change to satisfy his concerns.
But we're not acquiring any land from them.
That is correct.
No, it's just he's going to lose.
Well, we're going to show him how we've changed the design to accommodate his concerns.
Okay. As long as that's being addressed at the same time, because that's really the Radnor port. I mean, that's a critical part of the intersection. So. All right. Next item on the
Hold on, I think we have to vote on this.
So the motion it's to execute the Wawa agreement at the number that we just discussed.
All right.
And authorize Mr. Masterson to sign on behalf of the township.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Next item on the agenda is introduction of ordinance 2009-17 regarding the Wayne Business Overlay District zoning amendment to allow for prescription-only drive-through. A public hearing will be determined by the Board of Commissioners, and it's suggested that the hearing be held on October 12, 2009. Is there any representative here who would like to speak?
I've been here Yes, my name is Don Petros. I'm an attorney representing Rite Aid in this request. I've been here at a couple of previous meetings and made a presentation. The October 12th date for a public hearing is perfectly satisfactory to us.
And as I understand it, tonight, what we're doing is voting on whether to introduce this ordinance and then have a public hearing, after which we'll decide whether we want to adopt it or not.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's exactly correct.
And this is the same ordinance that was presented to us many meetings ago, as I
Yes,
recall.
that's correct.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to introduce ordinance 2009-17.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Next item on the agenda is Resolution 2009-31 to designate Wayne as a Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission Classic Town of Greater Philadelphia. And I'm going to defer to Matt Baumann on that so he can explain the particulars.
Thank you, Ms. Palino. In about 3 months ago, I was notified by DVRBC that we were one of 10 municipalities selected for this honor out of 353 total. I have Diane Droley here tonight and Beverly Barnes from the county here to offer their support. It's basically a marketing, a sophisticated marketing tool. Wayne will have their own website. It's going to be classictowns.org/Wayne, where local businesses may advertise on there. We will receive banners, other marketing brochures, and it's a really neat tool for downtown Wayne. So, like, if Beverly, would you like to say a few words?
Hi, I'm Beverly Barnes. I'm a resident, but also a planner with Delaware County Planning Department, and my director, John Pickett, has been very happy to send a support letter, as I do also, to congratulate you, Radnor, for becoming, I guess, the 20th. I think it's something like...
There's 21 towns, and Yep,
We're one of them. So it's a great honor, I think, and it seems to be people I've spoken to at DVRPC who created this project. They see a lot of success and a lot of thanks from the communities at what they're receiving. And it's almost like a branding of a community, which I think is a great thing for Radnor because it's such a unique place. Let's show that. It seems to be helping the businesses as well as, I think, highlighting the great historic character of a town. So I think we're right there in the right place. And I have a letter here for you guys, for my director. Should I give it to you?
Sure. Thank you.
I'd just like to let the public know that the cost for this designation and the DVRPC services is $5,000, which is anticipated to be paid out in equal installments over 2 years, and that the administration recommends that the board adopts this resolution. Any questions or comments from the public?
Move the approval?
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
No further business under community development.
Next is finance and audit.
Tom, we've been asked to readjust the agenda a little bit and move item G, the discussion on the proposed bond refunding, to the top of the finance and audit section so that our advisor who is here can provide his input and respond to questions and an overview and then depart.
Okay. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
First of all, I look forward to working with the board on this exciting project. Secondly, does everybody have the version dated August 17th? I noticed the ones on the back were dated some earlier date. This has the same numbers, but this version, which I sent to John Granger Thursday, has some additional information, which I want. So I have hard copies, so if anyone wants them.
Yeah, we have August 17th.
Okay, anyone over there need the August 17th version?
Well, the public would probably like to see
Okay,
it.
I have, for the public, if they're interested, we have copies here, which again has information in it that's not in the version that's in the back. Okay. I'd like to just run through, first of all, just the items of discussion tonight.
And could you just introduce yourself for the
my
benefit of
name
the
is
board and the
Gordon.
public and who you work for? And
Okay, my name is Gordon Walker. I work for PFM, which stands for Public Financial Management. We are financial advisors to many, many municipalities throughout the Commonwealth and the United States.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'd just like to run through the items that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the savings on the 02 AA bonds, the 04 A bonds, and then looking at the savings on an overall basis as to what the total is. Talk about the fact the board needs to make a decision on a minimum, and think about this when I go through the numbers, a minimum level of savings below which we put it on hold and above which we do it. And I can give you some guidance on that. I'm going to discuss the concept of a parameters ordinance, which would be the one and only formal action that the board would have to take in the future to accomplish this. Underwriters to sell the bond issue. I'm going to briefly touch on your rating status with Moody's and Fitch. Tell you about bond insurance. I've got a couple of proposals from banks to act as paying agent. And lastly, just a brief discussion on what the time schedule looks like or could be or should be. So
Sounds good.
So I'd like to just, again, I didn't talk about this earlier, but here's just a quick overview of the market, both the fixed rate market and the variable rate market since 2000. The blue line is the 20-year municipal bond fixed rate average. You can see actually it's been fairly steady. It's been in the 4 to 5% range since about 02. So compared to the variable rates, which are down in the bottom, it's been very steady. Again, the black line is the weekly tax-exempt rates, and they were very low in 02, 3, and 4. They went up to more of a normal range in 06. The crisis on Wall Street, you can see the terrific spike because everybody was pulling money out of money market funds, and now we are down to a rate that's less than less than 0.5%. So it's an incredible ride, so to speak, on that. But you are in fixed rate debt, and we'll talk about that now. You have an 07 issue outstanding, but that issue is not callable, so we're talking about an issue that was done in 02. It's small. It's the smaller piece of the two on page C1. It's the AA of 02 piece. There's $1,645,000 outstanding in column 2. The rates are 3.1 to 4.1%. The bonds are callable.
Why do you structure it like that?
Well, first off, I didn't structure it, but why is it structured like this?
Yeah, why are the rates going up over time?
Well, they don't actually go up over time. Think of this as a series of CDs. For example, the buyers that own the last maturity in 2017 are getting a rate of 4.1. And the buyers that own, the holders of the bonds that own the 2012 are getting a 3.5. And the rate of interest that you are paying is a blend of, if you took your calculator and went through and multiplied each principal amount by each rate, that would be the interest that you're going to pay in the next 12 months. Think of it as walking into a bank and saying, what's your rate for a 1-year CD? Okay.
So it's not a single bond, it's a series of bonds with different rates?
It's one bond with a series of maturities.
Okay.
And one buyer may own 2 or 3 maturities, or one buyer may own 5,000 of this.
Who divided it up?
Who set this up?
Yeah.
The person that structured the deal in 02, but the way it was structured was, if you take the principal in column 2, like a mortgage, and the interest in column 4, and you add those two together, you get a fairly level payment, like a mortgage, in column 6. And that's now there are many variations, but this is a very plain vanilla, just like a home mortgage, level, principal, and interest.
No, your home mortgage.
It's like amortized?
A home mortgage, you pay a equal monthly payment.
Correct, but the rate is fixed.
Right. Here, you have varying pieces at varying interest rates, which together produce a annual, or semi-annual, as the case may be, annual, pretty level annual payments.
Ranging
Like-
from 189,000.
Well, that's just because we're partway through '09.
Right, I understand.
But really ranging next year from 219,000 to 218,000 in 2017.
It's bracketed between 215 and 225,000.
And the reason it's not like that it's not an exact payment is because the denominations of the bonds are 5,000. So you can't make it equal every 6 months or 12 months because of that. So this is very typical.
Go ahead.
This is the way all bond issues pretty much are structured, with many variations. The bonds are callable, so let's skip over C2. So we're talking about 2 issues here, but we would sell them as one issue. It doesn't make any sense to split these into 2 separate offerings. They would be one offering. So this piece of it on C3 would be $1,710,000. And we've accounted for the redemption of the bonds. We picked an arbitrary date, 11/1. You'd owe the bonds that are outstanding at that point, the accrued interest, something to pay the underwriters, and a portion of the cost of issuance. So this piece of it would be $1,710,000 on page C3. And then what we do is we take the $1,710,000 on the next page and amortize it at today's rates, which are lower than the rates were in 02. Again, similar to refinancing a home mortgage. You're going to go from a higher rate to a lower rate and realize a savings. This savings, well, let me go back here. We're not extending the debt or shortening the debt. That's fairly normal. The rates of interest that prevail in today's market for AA Radnor Township are roughly what's in column 3. Remember, it changes every day, like the stock market. So they range from 0.5% to 2.97. If you amortize the principal in column 2 at those rates, you come up with debt service in column 6. and you compare that to what you have if you don't do the deal, in column 7, we find there's a $56,000 savings after expenses. Now, we've put that in '09, but we can shift that to 2010 depending on what you want to do. It's not going to be a big difference in where we put it, but just for purposes of tonight. So,
So your savings is calculated over the same term of the loan. It's simply a function of the fact that interest rates are lower now.
right. And we've added, of course, the issuance costs are in the $1,710,000. So when we say there's, at the box there on the lower right, when we say there's $61,000 of savings, that's after expenses. Then what we do is we divide the $61,008. Now we're getting into the measurement of whether this is a good deal or not a good deal. You divide the $61,008 by the amount of bonds outstanding on that earlier page, and we are at 3.76. Anything over 3% is considered a worthwhile transaction in our business. Some people do them for less. Some people get lucky. I got at Abington Township last week, we got almost 6% when their minimum was 3%. We got lucky. I mean, the market's good now because there's not a lot of issues on the market in August, and rates are come down a little bit.
Gordon,
But,
what was the principal amount that you,
of this on page C4?
yeah, to get to 3.76?
This
Is it the
piece,
1.6?
this piece of the overall issue would be in column 2, the bottom, $1,710,000.
Okay.
Okay? So, by the measurements of our industry, this is a worthwhile deal, but remember, that savings is achievable in part by doing it in conjunction with the other one, because the issuance costs are spread over a larger base, and the other piece is much larger.
We're actually paying more in principal.
Yep, exactly.
But much less in interest.
Yes.
You compare columns 4 from the 2 pages, we go from $296,000, almost $297,000 in interest, down to $169,000.
You always wind up paying back more principal, because remember, we have to build in the cost of doing it. And we're paying that accrued interest. That's built in.
Okay.
Okay? That's a good question. Comes up normally, so. Let's look at the bigger piece, the 04As. They are callable November 1, but we could do the deal, and we could close in October. We have, it's not critical that we close on 11/1. This is a longer issue. You look on page D1. This is $5,935,000 outstanding. The rates are higher. The rates are 3% to 4.6. The debt service existing is in column 6, starting with $493,000 next year. Let's skip over to D3. It would take $6,000,005 in round numbers to do this piece of it. So if we added this to the prior one that I talked about a minute ago, we'd get $7,715,000. So the combined issue, but we wanted to look at these separately to see if either one was not doable, did not meet the smell test, so to speak. But they both do. Again, we factored in some number there to pay the underwriters and to pay the share of issuance costs on this. We come up with $6,000,005. If you look over on D4, we amortize that $6,000,004 out to the same term as the issue is now, which is 2026. And when we compare the debt service on the new in column 6 to the debt service on the 04s, we find there's a almost $225,000 in savings in 2010. We can't get the savings on this one in 09 if we close on 11/1. I'm assuming you'd rather have the savings in 2010 anyhow, but there are different payment dates on these two issues, interest payment dates. And anyhow, this one, it occurs in 2010. So if you look down at the bottom of column 8, 214,000 savings divided by the amount outstanding, it comes up to 3.62. Again, very doable, or certainly never be criticized for doing a refunding with 3% or more. Some people do them for 2%. I've seen them as low as 1, but and some people get lucky and get much higher if they hit the market at the right time. Page E.
Yeah, can you stay on that page for a second? I
Sure.
just want to.
I'm just moving quickly because we have a lot to cover, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you have.
Because all of the savings on that one are really in 2010.
I can put the savings anywhere. I could have equal savings every year, which would be a bigger number. I could put it all on the end, and we could shorten the issue. Most
You
clients...
basically can structure this thing any way you want.
Pardon?
You can basically structure this thing pretty much any way you want.
I can put the savings in. Remember, the farther out you take the savings, the bigger the number is going to be.
Right, understood.
Most clients like to have the savings up front, so the taxpayers have the benefit either this year or next year, or in the very foreseeable future.
Okay,
So-
but you also don't want to tie the hands of the folks downstream. Now, the projected savings, the additional expense in some of the out years is not very large.
We try to sort of break even in the out years.
Yeah, I mean, but
Yeah.
But basically, we save, if I'm understanding your information correctly, $225,000 in 2010.
Right.
And in all the other years, it costs us a little $9,000 more.
We could structure it so it's exactly a break even after 2010 if you want. I mean,
But where we're going to need the savings is in the near term,
I'm assuming you are.
which is 2010.
Right. Now, if we just look at this on an overall basis, on page E, we find that there's a total savings of, between the two of them, of $276,000. And again, I think if you are inclined to make decisions tonight, I'm going to ask you for all the decisions at the end. But if you picked a 3% bottom line, let's not do it if it's below that. 3% of the outstanding amounts of the two of them is $227,000. $250,000 would be 3.3%. Again, the lower you set the number, the easier it is to get to it. The higher you set the bar, if interest rates rise, obviously the savings will decrease. So the higher you set the bar, the greater chance is if rates go up, we won't hit it. So if you set the bar low and the market's good, we might be 3 times the savings. I mean, Abington got twice there after waiting 6 months to get 3%. We wound up with 5.97 last week because we hit a very good period last Thursday in the market, and they have the same rating as you do. So again, think about a savings level, whether it's $225,000 or $200,000 or $250,000, as to where you wanted, above which we do it, and below which we kind of put it on hold and wait for a better market.
So the essence of your proposal is we issue bonds in the same amount for the same duration of time. We just get a lower interest rate.
Well, it's a little more than the same amount because of those issuance costs, but
Right.
in general, the same amount. We're not adding any new money. If you want to add new money, you can do it. I'm told by the administration we're not doing new money, but it's not too late to add new money.
So we're adding the issuance cost into the principal on the bonds?
Right. That's
Okay.
how, unless you want to do it otherwise.
Right.
That's how it's done in our business. You borrow the issuance cost.
Right.
And because the interest rate's so much lower, you're still going to wind up paying a lower debt service, even though the principal amount is higher.
The spread between the fixed rate and the variable rate, it kind of varies over the 9-year time horizon that you've shown us here. Are there ways, right now, if I'm understanding the chart correctly, the fixed rate is about 5%, the variable rate is probably about 0.5%. Are there ways to take advantage of the lower variable rate while protecting ourselves so that we don't take on a disproportionate risk?
You could refund one or both of these into a variable rate, but one, you have risk.
Right.
And two, we'd never know till the end how much you really saved or lost. So people in general don't do that. People go the other way. They convert variable to fixed if they think rates are going up. But rarely do people go from fixed to variable. People issue variable rate for new money. And there, you know,
For
Moody's
short
likes
term?
to see it at 25% or less of your debt.
Gordon, I want to understand, you said that the savings, the calculations you're showing are net of all costs?
Right.
That includes the financial underwriting?
Everything.
Yeah, everything.
Everything.
Okay. And I've been watching a lot of economic forecasts. They're saying that bond prices are going up, the prices are going down, the yields are going up on a lot of Treasury notes and whatnot. Are we going to get caught up in a situation where, like, this opportunity is going to vaporize in 6 months?
It depends who you talk to, but
Right. I mean, the fact that the federal government's issuing so much
we should
debt.
move quickly as we can, in my book, if the savings is there, and not gamble for something a little bit more. I wouldn't suggest we wait till Thanksgiving to do this. Just to get a little bit more, we may lose everything. But I can't predict rates any more than I can predict the stock market. It's a hazardous business predicting rates. But the experts tell you that because the federal government is going to have to borrow trillions of dollars, and someday the economy is going to pick up, that we are going to see higher rates someday. Now, whether that someday is 2 years, a year, 5 years, I don't know. But everybody's saying we're going to have higher rates at some point.
Well, if we decide to do this, and the worst-case scenario occurs where the rates do go up dramatically, we always have the right to pull the plug on it before we go to market, correct?
Right. We just don't go to market.
Right.
What we're saying tonight is that we want a 200, 225, or 250 savings. As soon as you can get us that, do the deal.
Right.
And if you can't get that, we don't do the deal.
And the earliest you could probably do an ordinance would be September. I assume you have no more meetings in August? Okay.
What's the,
Well, you get us a high rate, we'll have a special meeting.
You mean a low rate?
Low rate. You get $300,000 or $400,000
Okay.
savings, and we'll meet whenever you want.
maybe I'm not picking it up in your summary. What's the weighted average interest rate you're using?
I did a weighted average on each one, but not the overall. I could guess at it.
No, if you just point me to the weighted average.
If you look on the big one on D3, the yield is 3.55 there in the box at the bottom.
Ah, okay.
And the same number appears, it's because the other deal is shorter on page C3, it's 2.26. That's why that one's much lower, because the length of the issue is much shorter. Okay?
Okay, got it. What decisions do we have to make tonight?
Let me just discuss the notion of a parameters ordinance. If the board would agree to a parameters ordinance, and this is what we call it in September, it would designate a minimum savings. It would name a paying agent. I have a couple of proposals here to service the bonds, the bank that you pay and then they pay the bondholders. And it would name a couple of underwriters, and it basically would say that everybody, you can go to market if you hit the savings or more when everything is ready, i.e. the credit rating is in, the prospectus is done, and everything's ready, which could be a week afterwards or a day afterwards. Or if we're not at the savings level, it might be 3 months later.
This is something that a number of townships have been doing this year. I know I read Lower Merion did it already this year.
Right.
And saved a lot of money.
They don't all do the parameters, but it works well because we can hit the market on a good day and avoid the bad days, rather than being locked into a meeting, your meeting date.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Which is once a month.
Did the underwriters bid on this?
They don't bid on it, they
Buy it.
They buy it.
He's made an assumption.
Of rate?
That they're taking, what was it, 6%?
Oh, you mean their underwriting spread,
Right.
their percentage?
Right.
That's 0.6%.
0.6%. So will there be different underwriters proposing different spreads?
We can do that, but I was not proposing that we do that. What I was proposing was that we treat this a little, because the markets are very volatile and because financial strength is important, that we pick a team of the two most active underwriters listed on page F. RBC Capital Markets, which is a branch of Royal Bank of Canada, and PNC. If you see there, last year, between the two of them in Pennsylvania, they had over 50% of market share. So they do most of the issues. And if we picked both firms, we're not paying any more, and we get the benefit of the sales force of both firms. And that way, on the pricing day, whichever one gives me an indication of the better rates, I'm going to go with that, not the other one.
But don't they buy these things and then sell them?
They try to sell some ahead of
I
time.
understand that.
But they have the
But-
capital
but
between,
you just
this
talked
is
about-
only a $7 million issue. They have
You
the
talked about their salespeople, and I understand how that benefits them, that they can then sell it.
Well, it benefits you because the greater ability they have to sell, the greater ability they have to push the rates down to give you more savings.
Okay.
And it's our job to keep them honest by saying, look, Abington got this and such, therefore, last week, and the market's changed by this much, therefore, this is what Radnor should get.
They're essentially bidding against each other, are they not?
A little bit, but remember, they're working for you, and their job is not only to sell the bonds,
Keep it
but
down.
to get the lowest rate so you get the biggest savings. And I was going to suggest that we pick those two firms to do this. It won't cost you any more to have two. It's like a loan syndication. Just spreading it around, it's not going to cost you any more, and you get the benefit of both. And we get the benefit of the thinking on that day that we decide is the best day to go in the market of both firms. We pick the one with has the lowest indication and go.
But for example, how do you know that Bank of America and Merrill Lynch wouldn't do this for .00?
It isn't, what they charge is only a small fraction of what is important. What's really important is the interest rate. If I went to whatever firm you pick and said, would you do this for $3 a thousand instead of $6, they might say yes, but then we might wind up paying 1/8% more on the bonds because they can't take any risk at that level. When they're working for nothing, almost nothing, they cannot afford to just take any risk. They want to have them sold ahead of time. So you may wind up with a higher interest rate, actually, and be worse off.
Do these firms, do any of these firms have more efficient market because of their size? I mean, I would think that if you're...
Well, you can see here by the market share of both those firms, they each one have about 25% of the market share in Pennsylvania last year. They have different customers. And on a given day, one may be willing to take more risk than the other. But remember, this is not a big issue by municipal bond standards. This is $7.7 million, and they're used to doing deals $20 million, $50, $100. So it's an important one because Radnor is a very high-profile name, and a very accepted name in the marketplace.
John Granger and Bill Martin, you're recommending this to us?
Yeah, I would say the time to do it is very close. $750,000 is a fair amount of money. It's over 3%. I'm looking at it in Salisbury as well. And I think that when you can save that amount of money, it's something you really need to look at. And over the years, the market has changed such that used to sell them and get five or seven bids. Those bidders aren't in the market anymore. So you have a small number of underwriters. And I think the parameters ordinance is a good way to go because you're making the decision to do it. What you're reducing is the risk that the day you pick is the best day. You're letting the professionals who are dealing with it on a daily basis say, okay, today's an exceptional day. And I think Abington is a good case example. They waited, what, 5 or 6 months?
5 or 6 months.
Before they got to the point. So, and they doubled their savings. And that's the potential you have here. On the downside is, the bottom passed 2 weeks ago. You don't know, but you give the professionals the opportunity to ferret out the market and to take action when it's appropriate, as opposed to if you don't do it today, you got to wait another 2 weeks before you have another meeting. And you don't know what's going to happen in the marketplace in those 2 weeks. That's the problem. No one here outside of Gordon is in the market on a daily basis. And what you're doing is saying, we want to save $750,000.
I thought we were talking $250,000. Where did the $750,000 come
I was
from?
going to ask that
Or
question.
$250,000, I'm sorry. You're saving a lot of money. And you're telling him to go save that level. If you can get more, we're for it, but that's the minimum you're willing to settle for.
Bill Martin, you concur?
Yeah, in the past, we were used to picking a date, doing an issuance. This is a refunding, and by giving them the opportunity to go to that market on different date as opposed to picking a specific date, we have that potential, like the manager, John Granger, was mentioning, to reach that savings or better once you set that threshold.
We want to avoid days when there's too many issues in the market. We want to avoid when there's bad economic news or news that's pushing interest rates up. We want to hit the market when there's a great feeling in the market and interest rates are heading down, and those kind of things.
We're going to be selling our we're going to be cashing in, we're going to be reissuing the bonds, but in order to do that, we have to get rid of our old bonds, take and service that debt with new bonds.
Right.
There's a spread there. Who handles that? Like, because I assume we have to do this all on the same day.
It takes a month. If we had an ordinance, when's your meeting date in September?
Well, I'm actually sitting here wondering, why we wouldn't have a special meeting like next Monday. I mean, if we can't do this without an ordinance, and we're going to say...
We can't do it next Monday. I don't know that the lawyer...
It may set the parameters. If we have to wait till September to set the parameters, we could have a special meeting to set the parameters and get things in motion.
We couldn't do it next Monday, but we could do it in 10 days. The lawyers need some time to get the ordinance together and get it advertised, et cetera.
Got to be introduced first.
Well,
The township
how soon
has
can
a-
we get something to introduce?
Well, we only need 3 under the Unit Debt Act, forgetting home rule, that supersedes everything. You only need a 3-day advertisement.
But Gordon, just so you understand, there's, under this home rule charter, there's an introduction of the ordinance first.
Well-
Doesn't get advertised that night, but that can be done at any meeting. So I think what,
But is that, I don't believe that's required under the act that supersedes, because we ran into this at Haverford.
the Unit Debt Act?
Yeah.
Could we introduce it tonight without it being on the agenda?
Well, you don't have anything in front of you to
Yeah,
introduce.
right.
There's got to be some writing introduced at a regular meeting or a special meeting.
Yeah.
And then after that, you can follow the Unit Debt Act advertising requirements.
So the question is, how soon can we get an ordinance to introduce,
Well,
and when can we
I
schedule?
think mine and your solicitor varies a little bit, but in my view, we could do the ordinance, the one and only action you have to take in 2 weeks, which I think is the week before
Well,
Labor
now,
Day.
if the home rule charge says we have to introduce it,
Well,
then we
what
got to
I'm saying,
advertise it. You
I
can't.
just went through this in Upper Providence, and Chapter 53 of the statutes, and again, I don't practice law here, but I'm just telling you what I told them, and they went through the same thing with me last week on this, that Section 3033 or something supersedes, so in my view, all we need is a 3-day advertisement.
Well,
Do you agree with that, John?
So you have to pick, well, he's citing a statute that I'll take a look at.
Well,
but-
who's going to draft the ordinance?
That would be George Amon. You picked George Amon as your bond counsel.
Okay, and so
He
do we
would
know?
be directed to draft the ordinance around the things we're talking about tonight.
Okay, so why don't we decide what we need to decide tonight?
Yeah.
And then direct him.
We could do that the last week of, because we have not submitted a rate for a rating as yet,
yeah.
but we're on the verge of doing that. But I would suggest if you're willing to have a special meeting, and only take 15
Yeah.
minutes.
Well, I think we ought to,
Last week in,
consider doing it.
So if you pick
Why not?
If you pick 2 dates, a date between now and your first meeting in September for a special meeting, you can introduce, unless I'm convinced otherwise, by George Amon or Gordon, that you don't have to introduce it. I'm not sure I'll be convinced, but you can introduce that ordinance, assuming it's put together, and then you can do the advertisement for the first meeting in September.
Okay.
So if you pick 2 dates tonight, one would have to be a special meeting to do the introduction. The second would be whatever your first meeting is in September.
Okay.
The savings you're showing on C4 and D4,
Right?
that includes the underwriter's fee?
Yes, it's after all expenses.
Well, if we can save $250,000 or $300,000, what we ought to do is, John, is you ought to just come out and say, how can we do this? Special meeting this date, not even wait till September.
Yes.
Just come up with a process
Pick
that we
2
need to
dates.
do to get this done as soon as possible so we can set up the parameters and ready to go sometime in September, October, if we hit the savings.
So what do we need to do tonight?
Let's look at a calendar while we're talking about it, if anyone has a calendar.
Yeah, I have my calendar right here. So
Here we go. There's August.
You want to talk about it that week before Labor Day?
yeah, I'd like to talk about what process you're recommending that we follow.
Okay. You want to talk about dates first?
Yeah, Gordon, could George have the ordinance prepared by the 25th?
I think he could have a draft by, in 4 or 5 days from now. If we make the decisions tonight we have to make. Unless he's on vacation.
All right, so that would be the 25th. Then we could have the special meeting to introduce it. And then the board could have a special meeting on the 1st to adopt it.
Tuesday.
First is I'm sorry, today's the 17th?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this thing's all screwed up. No, okay. Then you're talking the 24th and the 31st, 2 weeks, two
Introduce it-
successive Mondays.
Introduce on
Introduce on the 24th and adopt it on the 31st.
I'm sorry, John, what was the second date?
31st,
Oh,
to
okay.
adopt it.
August, yeah.
Of August, to adopt it.
To enact, okay.
Is that all right with the board? Would be the quorum both nights?
Well, I'll be pitching, so.
And this all assumes that we
Well, I
don't
mean,
have to
you
do a
could name the
30-day
place
introduction.
later for the meeting, in between pitches or something?
John Rice, this assumes that we don't have to do a 30-day
Right.
introduction cycle.
Right.
Can we
Yeah,
do
there-
like a 5 o'clock meeting for 15 minutes? Does it have to be at 7? We can advertise anytime?
Anytime.
Yeah,
What?
anytime.
Yeah,
Anytime.
well then why don't we, if we could do it like at 5 o'clock?
Well,
It's
that
only
5
a
o'clock's
15
convenient for you, Bill, it's not convenient for
Well,
me.
I'm just suggesting, don't get snitty, okay? You always get snitty, don't get
No, because
snitty.
Bill, it's
Bill,
already, everything's
Bill, what
around your
time-
personal schedule.
No,
about
I'm
pitching
just
and-
saying what my schedule is. I'm not running around my schedule.
We'll need a quorum, so we just need to pick a time that works for most of us.
That's right.
3 days for a special.
And what do we have to decide tonight?
Well, here are
In
the,
terms
here are
of
the,
substance.
here are the three things. The last thing is the paying agent. If you look on page G, TD Bank, formerly Commerce, is your current paying agent on the 04s. They quoted an annual fee of $1,000 a year. I got a quote from Wells Fargo, which used to be Wachovia, because they normally come in low bid, and their quote is I have the emails and letters if you care. They're $400 a year, the substantial savings if you
So why wouldn't you go with them?
You should.
Okay.
And what about their stability? They did receive TARP money, right, Wells Fargo? A few hundred, I don't know,
I think they
15,
did.
30 billion, something like that.
They made a profit.
They're going to be around. Let me ask you this, I'm not joking
These
around.
paying agent things move around because banks, because the fees are so low, tend to sell their book of business to other banks, so that
Okay.
it could be that some years down the road, there's some other bank that's doing it because Wells Fargo sold their book of business to somebody else.
But it's not our problem, right? Once we,
They're not really holding any of your money.
They're
You wired it
bound.
on day one, and
Yeah.
that day they wired out to the bondholders. You're not investing any money with them. So
Okay. We have to
Wouldn't
decide
worry
the paying agent. What else?
the underwriters, which I'm recommending RBC and PNC, and thirdly, the minimum savings.
And what are you recommending on that?
On the minimum savings, I think I'd be inclined to pick a number like 225,000, or if you want to hit 3% exactly, 227, somewhere in the, something right around there, right around 3%.
Is
Okay.
RBC the guys who own Citizens?
No,
Who-
that's
who-
RBS.
What bank in this area does RBC own?
RBC is not a bank. They are They are an investment banker in this area.
I'm still perplexed why you think RBC and PNC can do a better job than Bank of America. I'm
Well,
just
because
curious.
Bank of America, they're not active in this area. I mean, honestly, I
So
wouldn't
are they
know
going
who
to sell, so the buyers for this issuance are Pennsylvania residents?
by and large.
Okay, I got it. Because that's the only place that's tax-free.
Right. So
So
we
it-
could just pick a percentage, 3%. In the,
Well, what would you recommend? mean,
I would
this-
recommend 3%. I think
Okay,
that's
as
good.
opposed to a dollar figure?
Yeah, I mean, because, yeah.
Okay.
3% savings after expenses. I'd suggest we pick Wells Fargo as paying agent and the RBC/PNC team as underwriters. And I think that's all we need.
So do we need a motion at this point
Yes.
along those lines?
Gordon, actually, I have a couple questions.
Well, I think the way we're going to do is we'll have the motion, and if we get a second before we vote, we'll invite public comment.
Gordon, I'm looking at the interest rate history chart,
Right.
and I notice a pattern here that it seems like July of about 5 of the 10 years is the lowest rate on the bonds. And we appear to be at the lowest rate of a cycle at this point. Do you see what I'm talking about? The slope of the, if you take the sections of each period,
Okay.
we appear to be at the bottom of a cycle. I just want to make sure I'm interpreting this right. That
Okay.
this is, in fact, a good time to do this, based on what I'm seeing in the chart. We can't predict the future.
We can't predict the future,
and the
but
past-
I think
Past
that
performance is not indicative of future results.
Right.
Right?
July
we're
and
at a
August,
low rate.
July and August tend to be slow issuance, slow for issuance, but yet the buyers are still buying.
Okay.
So there tends to be more I think that when we hit the fall, there's going to be more issues. Things just start.
It's a supply-demand issue.
It's a supply-demand in
Yeah.
part. It's also an economic thing. What people's perception of the economy, is it going to pick up, is it going to slow down as well? So those are my 3 recommendations, a
So,
3%
I just wanna
minimum
make-
savings.
You proposed a 3% rate as opposed to the absolute dollar figure.
You can do either one.
But am I able to, basically, does it translate directly that 270, 650, 654?
If you multiply 3% times the amount of bonds we are refunding, that will be the bottom line number.
So at the 3% rate, it's about 225,000.
Right. 227 I got.
I got the same.
Okay.
Okay.
And then we probably put in there in the motion the dates we talked about.
Okay. At this point, does somebody want to make a
I'll
motion?
move the approval.
I think,
We need to pick, I motion to appoint Wells Fargo as the bank,
As paying agent.
as paying agent. RBC and PNC as the bond underwriters. I don't know what the right term is.
right.
That's right.
Okay? And a 3% hurdle rate, 3% savings rate.
Minimum savings
Minimum
level.
savings rate.
Do you check with anyone to pull the trigger?
Oh,
Or
yeah,
what-
I'll be talking to these guys daily.
No, but do you talk to John
Oh,
Granger
sure,
and John Rice?
absolutely. Absolutely. We will not go in the market without checking with your administration, telling them what the savings looks at that moment.
And again, they give you the final approval.
Right. Absolutely.
And the motion should also include the dates of introduction and passage?
I
Is that
would,
what you're-
I would.
Introduction date of August 24th, adoption date of August 31st.
Okay.
All right?
And
It pending John Rice's checking that we don't need more than 30 days.
I'll
for-
get together with Gordon and George Amon and just, the Unit Debt Act has special advertising requirements. My only question is whether that preempts what you would normally do with an ordinance. So we'll figure that out between now and, we'll figure that out in the next day.
Okay, so the introduction,
Worst case scenario, John, is that you push it to the 14th of September for the ordinance. You can
Okay.
introduce it either.
So introduction on August 24th, adoption on August 31st.
We need time.
In that, we satisfy the Home Rule Charter advertising requirements.
Subject to the Home Rule
Subject
Charter.
to Home Rule Charter.
Second?
Any board discussion?
I just have one last question. You would, I assume, time limit this that says if you haven't issued it,
We can put a time limit on it, or we can leave it open-ended. Milton Area School District did one of these, and they didn't get their savings until for a year. But their savings wound up being 4 times their minimum, because they hit it in January when rates were very, very low, and nobody was in the market. But they did a parameters resolution, in January of '08, and they got their 4 times their minimum savings in January of '09. Typically, it doesn't go that long. We can put the end of the year here, or we can just leave it open-ended.
Why not leave it open?
I would. You can always rescind it.
yeah, I think it's subject to potentially what the future looks like. That's
Okay.
why I asked.
At this point, any public comment before we?
You should have it
vote on
second. We did we second?
Yeah, we did. He
Oh.
seconded. Yeah, come on up. Excuse us for a minute, Mr. Walker.
Sure.
Hello, Chip Layfield, Wayne. Thank you, Commissioners. I think the parameters agreement's a great idea. The school boards used that for the middle school recently, and I think it worked out generally pretty well. I am concerned, though, that our consultant's picking the banks that we're using, and I don't understand how we can not follow the charter and put this out to bid. And I appreciate the timeliness of this, but I don't understand, particularly all that's going on in the township recently, how we would want to, and how we are able to. Thanks. If somebody could answer, I'd appreciate that.
I can answer part of it.
Okay,
Can I just comment on that, too?
sure.
The charter requires putting it out to bid for non-professional services, and also the dollar amount. So we're looking at an annual fee at Wells Fargo of $400.
He's referring to Wells Fargo. I have a feeling he's referring to RBC.
All right,
and
let
PNC.
this gentleman
Okay.
speak about it.
Okay,
ahead.
if we can put this out for bid, and if a day or two before the bids come in, we find that we don't think we will hit the minimum, we can pull it. In other words, tell the bidders, we're not taking the bids. But the earliest we could do this would be the 14th of, because we don't have the rating yet, we have not applied for the rating, we wanted to get the go-ahead on this thing before we just willy-nilly go to Moody's with the rating request, and be sure the township is on board doing it. So the earliest we could do it would be the 14th of September, if we put this out for bid, unless you're willing to have a special meeting. But we can't set that because I don't know when. Moody's is very busy, and
Gordon? I believe the question was on putting out the bid for the underwriting. Or for professionals,
Okay,
for the paying agent, rather.
on the paying agent. Oh, okay. I already have 2 proposals.
Chip, can you answer, are you asking about the paying agent, the $400?
Yeah, no, I think so the underwriter's the bigger dollar amount anyway. Is that right?
I don't want to beat it to death, but I think the charter does say something about piecemeal accumulation, too. So if it's $400 a year, you know what the total cost is going to be on the bond. But I was talking about both. But
We can take proposals or bids from underwriters on how much are you going to charge, but remember, that's a small piece of the equation, because if we do that process, we don't know what the rate's going to be. What I was referring to, we could just take competitive bids on the bond issue, and the winner is the winner. Doesn't matter how much they charge, it's all factored into but we have to wait till at least the 14th of September, and maybe it goes beyond that. We can do a competitive sale, a true sealed bid. It's an auction, actually. It's an auction.
Well, I think
You
you've
lose
given us-
flexibility.
And that's a different process.
That's a totally different
Yeah,
process.
and I've seen online bond auctions by townships and city
But
governments.
that's the way we always did it before, when we had a calm
It works
market.
very well on a new money issue,
Yeah.
but it it tends to be, you know, we can't just hit the market on a given day
Yeah.
or a given week.
John, what's the story on bidding this out? Do we have to bid it out?
Well,
Can we set the parameters?
Competitive bidding for professional services is not, that's not required. I mean, I think that's what the question was, or at least a suggestion. I don't know whether this gentleman has a particular section of the charter he's referring to, but 711B, competitive bidding, lists the things that have to be bid out and the things that don't have to be bid out. And one of the things is contracts for professional or unique services or unique supplies, contracts for insurance and surety companies, bonds. So there's a whole list of exemptions. I don't know which one he's suggesting ought to be bid out because the charter requires it.
I mean, we are at this, we already, the reason that this gentleman is here is we bid out this whole bond refinancing process, did we not? Isn't that how
Correct.
we agreed to hire this gentleman?
I believe as a financial consultant, correct.
Right. So, and he is the person who we hired based on his bid and his expertise, and he's now given us his recommendation based on his expertise. And frankly, I'm comfortable with the recommendation and willing to support what he's recommending that we do here. So.
When you borrow money, you have to do it by ordinance, but there's nothing else at this point that has to be bid out.
Okay. Any other public comment on this before we vote?
Hi, I'm Jim Schneller. I'm a resident. I agree with this gentleman. I don't think this is I think you're working around the charter. I think that you have to bid that out.
Thank you.
Well, just so I understand, we're going to shoot for $225,000 savings. If we bid it out, it could be 150, 175, it could be 300, it could be 95,000.
If we go this route, the way the motion is,
we control it.
We control it, the timing, et cetera. If we go to a bidding, taking bids on the bonds, sealed bids on or like an auction, we will cancel the auction if a day or two before we think the savings is not there based on the market that day. And we'll have to postpone it to your next willingness to meet, either special or regular. And we have to do it, you know.
Do you suffer any adverse consequences from that repeated postponing?
No. The adverse would be taking the bids and then saying, well, sorry, the savings isn't high enough.
That's what I'm asking.
Thanks for going through all the bidding. But if they don't have to bid it, if we let them know that the market.
That's what I'm asking. If you went through the bidding process, they might let you get away with it once.
Maybe once.
But, you know, the second time and third
we don't
time,
want to take bids.
Right, they're going to stop bidding eventually.
We don't want to take bids unless we're sure we have the minimum savings. Otherwise, the bidders get turned off if you start, like construction bids.
All right, at this point, I want to call the motion to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Do we
Okay.
have times for those meetings?
No, but we'll get you the times.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Okay?
Any other questions?
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next item on finance and...
We're going to move back, just to make sure everybody's in the same place, to item D, the schedule of bills payable identified as bill list number 09-A. The grand total for the authorized disbursements is slightly over 1.9 million, actually it's pushing 2 million. And these bills have been approved by the respective department head, verified and processed by the finance department, and are within the 2009 budgetary limits as opposed by the Board of Commissioners. So I'll motion that they be introduced.
If they be approved, I'll second it.
Any board discussion? Any public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Did you want to talk about the bills?
About the disbursements, I had some questions about them, yes.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Diane Edbrill, 205 Spruce Tree Road. I guess I'll start with the legal services questions. There are two different law firms that received disbursements for legal services. One was noted legal services, and the other was noted special legal services. Can you just clarify for me which firms are handling which? I imagine one of these is Mr. Rice's firm. But I'm sorry, I can't recall the name of your firm. And which were the special legal services and what that was related to?
Do you want to respond to that, John?
Or, excuse me. You were looking on page 3?
Page 2. I'm looking at the bottom of page 2. It's the second, third.
Special legal services is generally for personnel matters.
Okay.
We're trying to begin to be a little more descriptive in how you spend money. In next year's budget, there'll be a line item called personnel labor, so you know how much money you're spending on labor issues.
Okay, great.
Legal services on page 3, Mr. Rice's firm is Grimm, Bean, and Thatcher, and that would be the general solicitors.
Okay, great.
Expenses.
And then that relatively small charge to Reed Smith is?
That's legal services, or
Okay.
labor services as well.
Okay. Then towards the bottom of page 4, there's just, most of these are actually very easy to understand, even with whatever abbreviations are put in there for, to make it fit in the column. But I'm looking at the third item up from the bottom of page 4. It's a charge to Service Unlimited for $3,360. It says AC work, S period, G period. I'm just curious what SG is. Everything else is pretty well described. But
Yeah, that's just abbreviation for Stevie G, our IT person. It's for HVAC work that was done on the Township building.
Okay, and SG stands for?
Steve G and Christopher, our IT person, and our building maintenance person.
Okay, great, thank you. I was, looking through the whole list of disbursements. I want to note that I'm very glad to see that we have child ID kits, and I think it just sort of goes to the strong work that's being done by the police department in general. Thank you very much, Superintendent Ruddy and your staff. Then the final thing I had a question about was a charge on the Sulpizio gym, was a bill to PICO for $1,128.42. I seem to recall a few months back there was sort of a pretty big bill to Sulpizio. It was in the winter months, and I think it had to do with a capped, like a leaking gas, maybe gas pipe or something like that. But I was just curious whether that charge was sort of in keeping with the other months of, sort of right around there.
I noted that and checked it, and it is in order.
Okay, great, thanks so much. Okay, those are my only questions regarding the disbursements for the month. Thank you very much for
Thank
those
you.
answers. That made everything really clear.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
We
All those in
already
favor?
voted.
Pardon me?
We already voted.
Did we?
Yeah.
Yep, we did. She came after the fact.
Okay.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the monthly budget update, and the other item right after that is the discussion on the 2010 to 2012 budget. Do you want to just put those together, Bill, or do you want to deal with them separately?
Yeah, I'd like to address both issues if we could, preferably at the same time, as they sort of run together. This year's budget is beginning to shape up a little bit better than the original projections were earlier in the year. Last month saw the beginnings of some better enlightenment in terms of revenue. I think the expenses still remain within budgets, and we've been cutting them back on incremental steps. One thing that I think was a bright spot was the transfer tax we received from within the last week was $280,000. Is that right, Bill?
Yeah, that's correct.
And it was like $30,000 more than you got in the same time period last year. So that's a very encouraging sign, and one that was not anticipated. So that's causing us to look at not only what you're estimated to be at the end of the year, which we will exceed that original estimation, but also what you likely to receive in next year's budget and going forward. So I think it has a very positive impact on the township rolling forward throughout the 4-year period we're looking at from 09 through 12. I think that as you begin, again, continuing discussions going forward into 12, one of the things we'd like to talk about tonight is some of the revenue enhancement issues on a variety of areas. A lot of these discussions have been, or proposals have been brought up before. They haven't been implemented. We'd like to bring them up again. They total a little more than $200,000 on an annual basis. They're ideas that I think the staff has generated. They sort of make sense to me as an outsider, but I think it's an opportune time really to position the township in where you charge for services. Historically, I prefer to have municipalities, when you compare yourself to your peers, you don't want to be at the bottom and you don't want to be at the top. You want to be somewhere in the middle, and I think where you want to be in the middle is a policy decision on the board's part. You want to be below middle or at the middle or above middle. And I think one of the suggestions that the staff is making that I support is you're being in concert with everybody else. You're not being out of line. You're not really being disruptive. And you're recovering your costs. And when you look at the Park and Recreation Department budget, they're recovering a fair amount of their program services. When you look at their programming, you really are, they're not recovering money on a couple of big items, and that's having an impact on the overall percentages. So the community services you have, like the movies and those things, you don't charge a lot of money for those, and that's a community service, and that should be something I think the government should just pay in their normal taxes. It's not like having a class for somebody that they choose to attend and you charge them a fee. In most cases, you're recovering your fees. I think where you need to look in that area is the differential between a resident and a non-resident. I think you're charging less. I think if you increase that fee, you'll be where everyone else is charging. And I think it's a reasonable expectation of non-residents to use your facilities. More importantly, I think the expectation the township resident is not supplementing a non-resident for using that service as well. I think in some of the areas in the recreation, the youth sports activities, there's some opportunity there for revenue. There's also an opportunity perhaps to talk to the sports organizations, and maybe you can share some of that revenue enhancement with them or put it to use on their facilities for something that they can't quite fund themselves. I think there's some opportunities there. I think in the long term, you can develop a better, closer relationship with the organizations, and they can use some of that money for their benefit within those athletic fields. Parking is an issue. I think the chief did a very good report on the parking meters. I don't think you're prepared to talk about that tonight, but that would be something I think you'd really want to look at in terms of your overall policy on your parking thing. That report was handed out this evening. So I think there's some potential revenue sources here that could really strengthen your balance sheet and put the burden of the expenses on the users as opposed to those who don't use the service. I think you need to have that conversation. Where's this right balance between taxpayer general purpose use and providing services for which a fee should cover, if not the majority of the cost, all of the cost? And to me, that's a good public policy question to have. And it does, in today's environment, you're looking at, again, a fair amount of money. And that rolls forward each year and has a very positive impact on the budget each year. So I would be prepared to go through those items one by one. If you want to set up a subcommittee to look at them, I'm fair game here.
John, previously you've discussed laying this out in, I think your terminology was a programmatic fashion, and we have not yet seen that. When are we going to see that?
Probably within 30 days.
Okay.
We're working on
All right.
getting some finer details there.
Because I'm just looking, and if I did my math right, for example, we've talked about the backyard pickup.
Right.
And the expenses associated with the sanitation department are approximately $2 million. The backyard pickup fee that you've projected in here is $600,000. So the tax base subsidizes $1.4 million of that. And if you do the same math with the Park and Recreation Department, you get about $2 million, and the fees are about $550,000. So you're in the...
Well, again, when you look at the Park and Rec, you need to look at programming versus cutting the grass.
Right.
And a large part of that $2 million is cutting the grass, to be honest with you. I mean, I think when you look in the, not the report you have, but the material that was handed out, supplemental material, where it shows the cost of providing a program, which includes the overhead, that it's a very near a break-even point.
Well, again, but if you show us it in the programmatic fashion
Yes.
that you've discussed,
Right.
then that will be more apparent.
All right, that's fine. We'll have that for the second meeting in September.
Okay. This projection that was passed out as part of the package, what you've defined as the
Right.
outlook budgets, does that reflect any of these proposed
No.
change? So this is under the status quo?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's what I suspected.
There's a, I guess in the supplemental, you showed us the 2008 Parks and Rec programs.
Right.
With the revenue, the expense, and net. And I think in the 2009, there may be a typo on the very last page of that packet.
Okay.
It's showing $366,618 in revenue. The expense is $104,004, and the net, I think, should be $262,614.
You'll have to
Unless
talk
I
to-
misinterpreted that, but
Tom did that. You have to talk with him and.
yeah, it's no big deal. I just want to make
Right.
sure. But I like the fact that it's, not that we have to get into all the detail, but
Right.
we're going from a net of 116 to 262, so it's a 150,000 increase in revenue.
Well, I would.
To offset the cost of these programs.
Right.
I guess, Tom, since you put the numbers together, at the bottom of the first page, it says you're increasing the softball rental fee, et cetera. And it says, based on increasing the rental fee to $275 per team, we get an extra, it says $550. Is that?
That's correct, based on the number of teams that we currently rent to for the seasonal usage.
So we rent it for approximately 22 teams.
Yeah, I don't have that in front of me, but yeah, if that's the way the math breaks out.
All right. John, in terms of these budget issues and recommendations regarding fees, what are you asking us to do?
I'm really looking for something that you seriously object to and don't like to see in the budget.
Did you
Otherwise,
did you say object to?
object to and don't like, otherwise I'm going to put it in there.
Okay.
And if you see something that you want to have more attention paid to or more information, tell me and we'll get it for you. I'm really looking for some overall basic guidance here.
You're not recommending that we adopt these
No, but
changes now?
I would hope that we would walk out of the meeting with some basic understanding. We're going down the right road, or we're not going down the right road is the first thing. And if there's something that's objectionable to the board, we'd like to know about it, and then we can dismiss it and spend time on other issues. If you have questions or you want more information, let us know, and we can provide that for you for the next meeting. Again, this is a dialogue trying to come down to a decision point in December so that you feel comfortable with the decision you make in December.
Okay.
There's a lot of information that's going to come to you, and you need to start weeding it out, hopefully.
He is asking for guidance as to whether or not he should accept these and assume that we would accept these for purposes of preparing the 2010 budget.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
Well,
And again, if there's something objectionable, the earlier you know about it, that focuses our attention then on what really is the bottom line.
John, I think what I'm looking for is making up this huge gap that we have. $6.5 million fund balance at the beginning of this year will become about a $3.5 million fund balance by the end of the year. And based on the current budget, I understand this is just
right.
This is just a draft, an And there's some projections in here. I think I totally disagree with the trash, the rear yard trash.
Right,
fee.
we agreed that it's a number that's going to be discussed going forward.
Yeah,
Yes.
but if I rolled that back in, we're still, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, we're still off by about 3 million. But we have a fund balance coming into 2010 of 3.58 million.
You're going to use, right now, as of today, with the changes I'm playing around with my head, you'll have a fund balance estimated of a little more than $1.25 million at the end of next year, plus, in a positive standpoint. That takes into account the de-transfer tax and all that stuff rolling in my head. I'm about a week ahead of you in terms of the information knowledge.
Okay.
That number that you just threw out, does that, in your projections, does that include the increased fees or
No.
not? So that's
Does
status
not.
quo again?
That's, it does not include the increased fees, it doesn't include the money on the borrowing. Those things are incremental, will be added incrementally as decisions are made. It does include the trash thing at some number we threw out, just to plug a number in there, with understanding that will be refined. It does include, in my mind, the de-transfer tax and how that impacts this year and next year and the year after. It also includes the $300,000 that I put in the manager's report that was underreported in the real estate tax. So when you start adding those numbers up, you're coming up with a number that's more than $1 million positive at 12/31/10. So you're starting to knock down that $3 million down to a number less than that.
You just, you finished, John? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you if you weren't finished. I thought you were finishing your thought.
I can't hear you.
I said, I was going to say something, but because I thought you were done, but then you made a gesture as if you were going to say something more, so I didn't mean to interrupt you if you were finished, not finished with your thought.
I'm finished.
The fund balance policy that we adopted,
Mm-hmm.
tied to revenues, you and I have discussed that.
Yes.
We probably benchmarked it off the wrong benchmark. Is your intent to present to us as part of the 2010 budget and adjustment to the right benchmark?
My estimation of benchmark should not be based on revenues,
Right, it
it's
should be
based on expenses.
Right.
Yes, that will be adjusted,
Okay,
yes.
right, thank you. And you'll present that to us as part of the 2010 budget?
Correct.
That's what I wanted to understand. Thank you.
But just so I understand, that the fund balance policy ordinance that we passed was a minimal 12% fund balance in terms of revenue?
Yes.
So we would have to make an amendment to our fund balance policy
Yeah,
or
I mean,
waive the 12% minimum?
We should have tied it to expenses.
It should be tied to expenses, the same percentage, but tied to expenses,
Okay.
because that's what you're worried about.
Well, I guess the $1 million fund balance sounds great, but of that $1 million, $600,000 of that is the rear yard trash number, I assume.
Yes.
Look, I would love it to be that number, and I think everybody would love it to be that number, but I can't see how it's possible. I just can't see it. But let me finish.
Yeah.
The gap we have is 2 to 3 million. We have to have a fund balance at the end. So we have to make up it's about 2 million, right?
Yeah.
Kevin, I don't know what number you're using. Is it 2 million for a fund balance?
John has basically said he's made, what we've seen is based on status quo, no increase in fees, nothing, and so
Right.
it's just a snapshot. And let's see where we are when
I'm
John
prepared to
pulls it
have,
together.
at the next meeting, the first meeting in September, to have a much better discussion with that. I will lay out a couple spreadsheets that'll show you, here's the status quo, here's some of the changes you made, here's where I think we are today based on these assumptions. The one assumption that will not be fully understood will be the trash thing until we have more information. We're plugging that number in so we have a placeholder. You can subtract it, you can not subtract it, but it's there to remind everyone it is the pivotal issue in the budget. I still believe that you'll have a positive fund balance at the end of 2010. I'm working on a fund balance at the end of 2012. That is my guiding line. That needs to be a positive number. And that's where I'm focusing my energies. So that if you have a positive fund balance on 2012, you'll have a positive fund balance on 2010. So it really is guiding towards that number, and what's most likely going to happen is you'll run through all these incremental changes. You'll be striking up a balance with the back in your mind. At some point in time between now and 2012, you're going to have a tax increase, unless something untoward happens that is not currently understood. One of the biggest unknowns is the state going to make an adjustment to the minimum municipal obligation payment for the next 2 years. The budget assumes that the township will pay an extra $1 million in the next 2 years for that obligation. That's a huge hit on the fund balance. That is the single most important expense that the township can't control. So if that happens, that has a dramatic impact on 10, 11, and 12. And until the state legislature does something with the budget and everybody starts seeing what their MMOs are beginning in September, I think you're going to hear a loud scream throughout the state, because that number is going to affect every municipality in the state in a negative fashion.
Is that MMO contribution in the current draft that we have?
Yep. Yeah, those two numbers up there, $1 million more.
John, in the plan that you have for pulling the budget together, are you going to make any assumption around payouts of the accrued vacation, sick leave, and any of that
Yes,
stuff?
they're in there.
Okay. There's an assumption in there, or is the full amount?
Okay, it's a two-part question. There are planned retirements or anticipated retirements that will occur. The cost for those to occur will be paid in the year that they do occur. Okay? The longer-term GASB requirement is deferred until some of that hit comes up to be paid going, in the first couple of years. I think there is, beginning in the third year in 2012, there is a payment to start paying that off, more than a pay-as-you-go policy. But you have such a big hit in the first couple of years, to put money away in addition to paying your current obligations, I think is something that you may not want to do, given your financial condition.
Can you, is it in this, is that payout in this worksheet yet?
Yes.
Can you point me towards it? Or is it just spread into all the various line items?
Give me a minute.
Okay.
Look on page 12. When you have the transfers.
Okay.
The next to the last one is captioned transfer to unused leave liability fund. You have 50,000 in 11 and 100,000 in 12.
So if somebody retires in 2010.
The payment out to the retirees in the current is paid in the salary line item in the year in which they are retiring. For example, if you go back to the if you look on page 6, the police department salaries.
Okay.
There's a couple officers who are going to retire in 10, and the 3.9 million, that payout is in that number.
When you present the budget, I just liked at the end of it all to understand how much.
I'm sorry.
When you present the budget, I'd like to know what the assumption is around.
Yes, we could do that, yes.
Thanks.
We'll provide a page that lists all the budget assumptions and how, and where they are affected.
Okay. Does anybody have any problems with any of these recommendations that we have been presented with? I mean, personally, I don't have any problems with any of them, except the trash fee I thought was kind of high.
Right, we all accept that,
Right.
and as we work forward, that number will be adjusted probably substantially downward, but we
Okay.
still don't know.
John, at our last meeting, I'd asked that we look at the question of furloughs, and I was expecting some type of due diligence on that. Where are we with that due diligence?
I'm waiting for the legal counsel to provide a final answer. We had a meeting with the representatives in the rate union. We made our proposal to them in writing, and we were waiting for a response. They have to take it to their membership, so we're waiting for that to happen.
Okay, I have another question. Kevin, you had mentioned that we should be tying the fund balance to expenses.
Yes, that is the way it's done.
Okay, but, I mean, when I look at revenues and expenses, they're pretty much tightly coupled at this point. We've tried to cut expenses to meet our revenues, so really, it's the same number. I mean,
The concept of the
Show me
fund
the-
balance is essentially a savings account to deal with the shortfall in your revenues
Right. The fund balance is
Right.
to, as Kevin said, the fund balance is to cover a shortfall in revenues.
yeah, I'm not debating that. I think what I'm saying is 12% of your revenue number is very close to 12% of your expense number at this point. And it comes out to be about 2.2 million. And the current budget, the draft, is showing 4.5% fund balance at the end of 2010, and that's with the really rosy trash number in there, and I think some numbers for personnel costs that probably aren't accurate in terms of what we probably will see. So I'm still stuck on, we have some really good recommendations here from staff on how to save tens of thousands of dollars, but what I'm not seeing is a way to save $2 million. And I think I'm still stuck on how do we get there between now and next year. I just don't see, I think I'm just having a block here, but I don't see it. I don't know how we're going to get there. You know, if people retire, we save money, but we have a lot of we have a lot of expense on severance. So, you know, how do we get the 2 million number? Is, you know, I think I'm thinking that time's running out for this year, and that we need to get these numbers to the point where we will in fact have a 12% fund balance at the end of 2010. But everything I'm looking at the current budget. If I back out the $650,000 on the trash, I'd say if it were $50,000, we're still at a $200,000 fund balance versus a $2 million fund balance. So we're off by a magnitude of 10. And I appreciate everyone's working hard at this, but I think we're still not reacting in the way we need to react. I don't have the answer, but I keep looking at the numbers and I keep saying, where's the 2 million? Because we need 2 million. We need to come up with $2 million in a combination of savings and revenue enhancements and taxes. So where does that, you know?
Well, I think you have $500,000 on your plate tonight. Clearly, there's going to be a tax increase. It's not going to be $1.5 million. I can tell you that now. It'll be substantially less than that, and the balance will happen incrementally over time. This is at the time of the year and the time of the economic situation where things change. The feelings that everyone felt was occurring in the early part of the year is beginning to play out through the early part and up to the mid part of the year. I think the fact that your business privilege tax is still remaining strong, even though it's a lagging indicator. I think when you get your mercantile tax at the end of this month, and to me, the activity that's going on in the housing market in a town is something, the strength of it is unexpected. The fact that it occurred in an upward slope was not unexpected. And I think if it continues in the month of August at relatively the same strength that it did in July, I think you'll have a stronger confidence level that you can increase the revenue stream in the year 10 and 11 and 12 above what it is projected to be. And there we're not talking $10,000. We're talking $300,000 to $500,000 a year. So I think if there are some still economic savings in the organization that we're working on. There's still some opportunities to reduce expenses, but I think when you look at it, you're looking at several, probably a half a dozen different steps on the revenue side that aren't quite materialized yet. There's still, the economy's moving in that direction, and absent the world falling in, you're going to have some positive impacts on the revenue stream, because we took such a very strong pessimistic viewpoint early in the year. And I think that was the right tone to take. And I think now some of the pessimism can be waned a little bit. I'm very encouraged by that housing market thing. I mean, that just blew my entire thought process out a little bit. I was expecting something in a $200,000 range, but having a 40% increase over that just was a little bit abnormal. Now, whether or not it was a true anomaly and August comes back at 130, then you got a problem. But I don't think August is going to come in at 130. There's a lot of pent-up housing demand in there. It's not one month is going to wipe out all the housing demand in the township. I think building activity is beginning to pick up again on the homeowner side. You won't see any big housing construction, any big projects come through this year nor next year, but you'll be seeing the strength of the homeowner making an investment in his property continue through this year and next year, and that'll have a positive impact on the revenue stream.
Is this document available for us to look at?
I believe it's back there. Is it back there?
It was not back there.
Okay, here, you can have mine. It's not in order. The pages are numbered on the bottom.
And actually, I want to stress that this document is only a draft. We're way ahead of schedule on doing a budget.
Yeah.
And the critical analysis we're doing now is just trying to set the tone for what's coming in the budget.
That's correct. And by the way, what I handed out and what you have is outdated by at least a week, and by all the decisions that have been made or the information that's come in the past week. So
It's a work in progress.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to close the budget. Do you have something else to say?
Can I make a comment about this?
Sure.
My name is Christina Peroni, and I live 204 Wyndham Lane. I don't know if this was on the website or not. I didn't see this on the website, but I think one of the lessons we needed to learn over the past year is that this information, to have a reasonable public conversation, it needs to be available. I mean, it takes time to absorb things like this.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure why it wasn't put out with the rest of the documents for the meeting.
It was put out with the rest of the documents at this meeting.
But it wasn't made available in advance of the meeting? No?
like online to look at? I mean, this is a
They
comprehensive.
they usually just put the agenda online, and then any documents, the backup material is usually voluminous, so we usually have a certain amount put out at the beginning of the meetings. Depending on the number of people who show up, it may be taken out.
If the board wants, we could put it on beginning next meeting. Whenever it's updated and given to the board, we can put it on the agenda. It won't be every week, so everybody
Right.
knows that.
No, it's just helpful because as you all, as everybody knows who's tried to look at a budget, it takes time to absorb it, understand it, reflect upon it, to comment intelligently. So my comment is only on process, that I appreciate you saying you're going to put it online now so the public can take part of it. But philosophically, I remember being in a meeting with Commissioner Mahoney when he was last president saying, yeah, we're going to have this fund balance problem. And here we are, fast forward almost a year, and we have not done anything about the severity of this fund balance. So if it's furloughs, then have the nerve and courage to do it, please, because a 30% tax increase is not acceptable to everybody I know in Radnor. So I know a lot of board members are planning to leave, and I think it's unfair and unconscionable that you're just going to leave the dirt for the remaining board members. So, and to the public, because we know that we're going to get stuck paying the bill. So I would ask you guys to have the courage. This has been going on for months, where we've been having, from the firehouse, we said, let's have a special meeting. Let's have a special conversation on the Finance Committee. And it didn't happen, because everybody's busy. Well, if you're too busy to be commissioners, then step down, because we need people who have the time and energy to take a look at this money stuff. This is really important. We can't just act surprised in December when it's a 30% tax increase. So, while your answers, Mr. Granger, I don't know what I thought of your answer to why we're not going to hit that fund balance, but it didn't satisfy me. And I would ask you guys to have a special meeting, spend the time, and do the calculations. Mr. Fisher knows the math. He's saying the math out loud. I've done the math. It's exactly what Mr. Fisher says. So, come on, have the nerve to make the tough choices. You owe that to the people in this township. Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to close the budget discussions.
Do we need to do that?
Want to keep going, or?
There's
You done?
one other item under Finance and Audit, which is a release of $100,000 that's in the capital budget to the Bryn Mawr Fire Company for the acquisition of a new ladder truck. Is there anything more we need to say on that, Bill?
That was part of your the May meeting approval of capital projects you selected to fund through the rest of 2009. The money is available in the capital budget and was approved by the board in May. So they're just asking to have that capital payment made to them at this time.
Move the approval.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And there's nothing on the library.
Okay, Personnel Administration.
We have one item on the agenda. We have the appointment of the Township Labor Council. We've been looking at Labor Council. I think we have to do this once a year. And we have a couple firms that gave us their bids. And I'd like to motion to accept the bid proposal from Archer and Greener, which came in the lowest.
We have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nothing further.
Park and Rec. I guess that's Mr. Harvada, who's not here. Authorization to bid for park signs for newly named park areas.
Move the approval.
Second. Do I have a second?
Second.
Sure.
Hello, I'm Jim Schneller. I'm a resident. I wanted to reiterate what's been said a couple times, that, and I see it in a slightly different way, but sometimes it might seem like $100 or $500 expenditures really make no difference at all. But I think we all know from personal experience the way that these things, it's almost like it's supernatural sometimes, but the fees of this magnitude actually do make a difference. And I wanted to say something about things like expenditures for park signs, things like the incredibly, well, not to criticize, but the incredibly small, I think, fees that are being charged these cell phone towers. These are just two examples. Are there new fees you can come up with? Are there new fines you can come up with to accumulate additional monies?
We're on park signs. That's the only thing we're discussing.
Well, we just
You can
completed
discuss whatever you
the
want in
finance.
public comment. This is park signs.
As a general policy, please.
Okay. I think it's been
Yes.
moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next is the authorization to purchase from Sportsline, Inc. through CoStars, a basketball court resurfacing at Odorisio Park, Clem McCrone Park, and Bo Connor Park, not to exceed the funds allocated in the 2009 capital budget of $30,000. Is there a
move
motion
the
to
approval.
authorize? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Why don't we go to the memorandum of understanding between Radnor Township and the Wayne Business Association to undertake the Fall Festival? Do we need to have a discussion of that? Is that,
Move the approval.
Pretty routine every year.
okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next is a discussion regarding the proposed approval of the amendment to the Willows Cottage lease with Radnor Conservancy. Okay.
Good evening. I'm John Fisher, President of the Conservancy. The amendment has been prepared and reviewed by your solicitor. Now, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the only thing that you can do tonight is to authorize the solicitor to prepare an ordinance. So I'm prepared to discuss the amendment tonight, but if you want to just authorize the preparation of the ordinance and defer any discussion of the amendment itself until the ordinance has been prepared, that's fine with me.
Yeah, that might make sense. Is everybody comfortable with doing that?
Yeah, I just have, where does the farmer live now?
The farmer lives in a house that we are leasing from the Ardrossan estate.
Who is leasing?
Beg pardon?
I'm talking about which, maybe I'm not on the right spot, John. The farmer who's farming the CSA.
Correct.
That's where he lives.
We are renting a house now.
Who's we?
Well, the Conservancy pays half the rent, and Greener Partners pays half the rent.
Okay.
John, do we need anything else tonight? Just to...
Well, you have it on your agenda as the discussion of the lease. You can't approve the lease tonight. John's correct. There's got to be an ordinance prepared and introduced, just like any other ordinance. The initial lease was done by ordinance, I think, back in March. So it's up to the board. If you're going to move an ordinance forward, if you have the time to discuss the terms of the lease tonight, you could do it tonight. You could do it whenever the ordinance gets introduced. The earliest that would be your first meeting in September. So, I mean, basically what has been done at this point is there's an amendment to the existing lease. Which extends the period of time that Conservancy would be permitted to use the property. It's 2 terms of 3 years beyond the initial term. And there's some additional uses that are proposed. I think you all have copies of this. And it's really up to you what you want to do. You want to have the discussion tonight? Do you want to do it whenever the ordinance gets introduced? The ordinance is basically going to be boilerplate. It's going to reference this document, and it'll come back to you in September for introduction, whether you discuss this tonight or not. It's your call.
I'm going to recommend we do it in September. Anybody have a problem with that?
I think you should do it when you have the ordinance together.
And is that sufficient authorization to prepare the ordinance?
You should motion to authorize my office to prepare an ordinance that would reflect the terms of the lease that have been prepared up to this point.
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well, we're not going to vote on anything until we have the ordinance, but if you want to come up...
Why pay a lawyer to go and do this when it might not be the will of the public? I mean, let's use our monies in a smart way.
Well, it's, number one, you can't speak for the audience. You got to come to the mic. Number one, nobody at home can hear you. So,
There was a very tumultuous conversation last meeting about people believing in or not believing in whether we should extend the lease and give more land to the Conservancy for these 25 people who get their produce and letting the farmer live there for possibly free. There was a very tumultuous conversation. And to, again, have a document that we're having a conversation about without it being disclosed to the public, I'm quite sure that was also not on the website. So before you guys have conversations, please allow us to participate in it. And I think nothing should be done. We shouldn't authorize a lawyer to do anything and pay for a lawyer unless we know what we're talking about. So, you know, you guys have the vote. You guys can do whatever you want, but the public at least gets a chance to have a conversation about before you spend legal dollars on something the public may not agree with.
Procedurally, is this now the time for public comment on this issue? Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Masterson. I would just like to talk about this issue a little bit quickly. And this is this
the first thing you got to do is you got to state your name and address, okay, for the public.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Spengler. Dan Sherry, and I'm a resident of Radnor. I'd like to use this time to talk about this amendment, which I have not seen and I did not see put forward on the table over there. I don't know why that's not on the table.
It's not an amendment. Well, it's just the lease agreement.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if it's a real estate matter. Does this fall under a real estate issue?
It doesn't matter. It's public. We
I mean, it's
discussed
public,
it. We
but is it a
we
real
discussed
estate
all the
issue?
issues last week, and you made your comments, and Ms. Peroni made your comments.
Last
on
week?
this. The last meeting, we had a full-blown discussion on whether we should rent to the farmer, whether we should give up more. I mean, the public did speak at the last meeting, your opinion on this.
No, I actually disagree with that quite fully, Mr. Spengler. What was discussed at the last meeting was whether or not you guys are going to enter into a dialogue with respect to the amendment. The amendment and the language to the amendment has not been made public as far as I can tell. I don't see it over there. I haven't been provided with a copy, and I think that is an important distinction. But with respect to this amendment, which again I've not seen, it was described tonight on the agenda as discussion on proposed approval of amendment to the Willows Cottage lease with the Radnor Conservancy. And I have to say, just objectively, that's one of the more awkwardly worded sentences I've ever read. But be that as it may, I was very interested in finding out some information on this topic. At the last Board of Commissioners meeting, which actually Commissioner Spengler was about a month ago, the president of the Radnor Conservancy, John Fisher, that's with a C, not Commissioner Fisher, came before this board and stated that the Conservancy wanted to rent out the living quarters of the Willows Cottage, and specifically, Mr. Fisher stated that the Conservancy wanted the farmer, who is not employed by the township but is employed by a private entity known as Greener Partners, to be the one living in the living quarters. And even more specifically, John Fisher stated that the Conservancy was going to be the entity to charge and keep the rent. Since that time, this meeting has been uploaded on YouTube, and I reviewed it just to make sure. Now, Mr. Fisher stated all of this because he was apparently bringing forth, or at least opening the dialogue officially, to this amendment to the lease agreement, which, as I just stated, really hasn't become a public document at this point, that had been originally entered into. The original lease was entered via an ordinance on March 9th, 2009, which was about 4 months before the last meeting. Now, some members of this board seemed very puzzled, and others, such as Commissioner Fisher and Commissioner Spengler, seem to be very enthusiastic. Commissioner Spengler, in particular, stated that he had a vision for Radnor Township and alluded that this was contemporaneous and in keeping with that vision. Now, at the last meeting, I was very concerned about a Greener Partners employee being permitted to live in one of Radnor's most historic publicly owned buildings, and I raised some concerns at the time, but at the time I had not had the opportunity to review the lease, specifically the one that was entered on March 9, 2009, as well as some of the other documents, and I did so. And wouldn't you know it, the decision that you're all planning to make at the September meeting is not, according to the Radnor Conservancy through its actions, a decision that is actually yours to make. And I think I can prove that, but I may need to use the overhead projection. This decision was made for you prior to January 22nd, 2009. Now, if we could get the, is there a way to get the overhead? I don't know where to put the document.
Place it right on the table there.
To my left here?
No, that
On the
table.
table.
Down
On the table, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll put it down.
Middle
here.
of the table.
There's an overhead up in the ceiling.
Okay. Let's zoom in on this really quickly. Now, this is a document which Radnor Township has on its website as being entered January 22nd, 2009. So this is when this document first became available. It's a document that was authored by the Radnor Conservancy, but nevertheless, Radnor has it on its webpage. You can access it. There's a couple portions that I've highlighted here, and now that it's been on camera, I'll read from it verbatim. First and foremost, it states that the Skunk Hollow Community Farm will open in spring of 2009 at the Skunk Hollow Park adjacent to the Willows in Radnor. I'll skip down to the next highlighted section, which states that the Skunk Hollow Community Farm will initially be limited to 20 to 30 members, with expansion anticipated each year. That was a matter of contention at the last meeting as to how many people would initially be benefiting from it. But this is the point that I believe is most important. The Friends of the Willows Cottage have already initiated the beginning phases of an environmentally green restoration of the Willows Cottage. The farm will be a natural partner for this project and will feature educational and demonstration gardens around the cottage, serve as the CSA distribution site, an education center of the community farm, and eventually house the farmer. So that's January 22nd, actually it's prior to January 22nd, 2009, that the Conservancy is telling people that the farmer is going to live there. So what I would like to ask the members of this board initially is, did anybody on here promise the Conservancy prior to January 22nd, 2009, that the farmer could live at the Willows Cottage? Okay, well, hearing no response on that, here is another document. I'll put it in the center here. This was also posted by Radnor Township on January 22nd, 2009. This is a mailer that the Conservancy distributed asking for, among other things, help and raising money for this particular community farm. But as you can see by that highlighted section, which I'll read right here, it says, housing. One of our most urgent and immediate needs is to find affordable, parens, or free, end parens, housing for the farmer for this season, February through November, as the Willows Cottage is not ready. If you have housing or know someone who does, please check here and we'll contact you. So again, pretty unambiguous language that the Conservancy is going to have this farmer live here. So again, I'll ask, prior to January 22nd, 2009, did any commissioner promise the Conservancy that they could house the farmer at the Willows Cottage? Okay, nobody's going to answer that. Well, let's flash forward here to this lease that you entered into on March 9th, 2009. It was done via an ordinance. This is actually available on Radnor's website, and because it's a number of documents, I'll just read the relevant portions verbatim, but this is a lease agreement between Radnor Township and the Radnor Conservancy. March 9, 2009, so that's a couple months after the Radnor Conservancy is telling the members of the public that the farmer is going to live there. Here's the lease. The lease is for, and I'll read under property description, the parcel of ground outlined on the plan attached here as Exhibit A and made a part hereof consisting of approximately 3 acres situated in Radnor Township, Delaware County, Pennsylvania, or on any other land the landlord may designate by mutual written agreement, the premises. Tenant, that's the Radnor Conservancy, shall have the right to drill a well and this actually is a side note interested me, and erect deer fencing, sheds, barns, and other agricultural structures on the premises in conjunction with its permitted use, hereinafter defined. Further description of the property is as follows. The 2 existing garage/stable areas, the garages, located on the first floor of the Willows Cottage, situated near the entrance to the Willows Park, and the existing outbuilding located to the rear of the cottage, and the land immediately surrounding the cottage for the planting of demonstration gardens subject to Section 4 below. So that's it in terms of the property description. No mention about the living quarters at all, just the garages and some ground. And oh, by the way, if the Conservancy wants to put up barns and sheds, they have the ability to do that. Permitted use. This is the next section of the lease, because I was interested as to whether or not there was going to be any indication about having somebody reside in the building. There is none. Instead, it states, tenant, again, Radnor Conservancy, shall use the premises for growing fruits, vegetables, and other crops for sale or distribution to its members for a CSA program to be established by the tenant and or its manager as hereafter defined, as well as for educational programs to be offered to children and adults. There's another portion as to what they're going to use the garages for. Nothing again about residency. Oh, and here's a real interesting portion. Section 5, amount of rent time of payment. Tenant shall pay the landlord a total annual cash rent of $1 for the premises payable in advance. And by the way, this is a 3-year lease. It's going to be in effect through 2011, end of the year 2011. So, nothing in there with respect to the farmer living in the building. So accordingly, I'll ask whether or not anybody here verbally told or promised the Conservancy that the farmer would be allowed to live there at the time this lease was enacted. All right, well, let's move onwards to May 12th, 2009. So this is approximately 2 months after you guys enact the lease. This is a Philly.com article, meaning that it ran either in the Inquirer or the Daily News. It's an article written by Misha Aaron Arnosky. I'll put it down here just so potentially the URL can be picked up. It's at the bottom of this particular document. I found this document a little bit disconcerting because after this lease had gone into effect, a prominent member of the Radnor Conservancy, a person on the board of directors, and a past executive director of the Radnor Conservancy spoke to this reporter about the hoedown that happened at Skunk Hollow.
Who was that person?
This person is Elaine Paul Schaefer. Here's the portion of the article that I find to be rather interesting. The Conservancy recently hired the nonprofit company Greener Partners to manage the farm, and Greener Partners will pay for a full-time farmer who will ultimately live at the cottage once it's been rehabbed. We're still renovating, Schaefer said, so now he's renting a cottage a block away until the cottage is ready in 6 months. Again, pretty unambiguous comment to the local papers of record. So I'll ask if prior to May 12, 2009, anybody on this board told the Radnor Conservancy, specifically promised the Radnor Conservancy, that the farmer could live in the cottage. Well, okay. What does all this mean?
Yeah, what does it mean?
What does all this mean? It means one of two things, Commissioner Spengler. Number one, the Conservancy is either, and by the Conservancy I mean its officers, is completely pathological and doesn't care about the truth and is willing to fabricate the truth to the local papers of record, and in addition, the members of its organization and the people in Radnor Township by saying that the farmer is ultimately going to live there when they know full well that they don't have authorizations from you guys, or, and I believe this is the more likely scenario, there are members on this board making promises outside of open meetings, and members of the Conservancy are relying on those promises. That's very disturbing to me, particularly because we're dealing with a major taxpayer asset. Well, I asked everybody up here whether or not they told anybody.
And nobody said they did.
Nobody said they did, and that's why it's either one or the other. The Conservancy is so reckless with the truth that they're going to tell people that the farmer's going to be able to live there ultimately.
They can't have a goal. They can't have a goal that they're striving for. They can't have a goal for the farmer to live there.
What's the goal?
The goal is for the farmer to live there.
Is that what they said, that the goal is for the farmer to live there?
Eventually, they hope that the goal will live there, but they can't live there unless the commissioners approve it.
What I read to you, Commissioner Spengler, is that the farmer is ultimately going to live there, that the farmer will live there, and if we'll take another look at this document right here, just to say what it specifically says for him.
That was their hope and their goal, and the commissioners have to approve it.
It's interesting that you're giving the motivation for the Radnor Conservancy, Commissioner Spengler. What is your basis for saying that?
Because I care about the Radnor Conservancy. They're doing a great job in Radnor Township. I appreciate everything they're doing and everything they've done, and I'm very supportive of them.
Commissioner Spengler, my question was, have you had conversations with the Radnor Conservancy in effect?
No,
with
I
respect
have no
to the pumps?
conversations.
You had no conversations
No
with
conversations.
them whatsoever?
No.
Okay, well then that narrows it down. I guess the Radnor Conservancy is just very reckless when it comes to their representations to the press and to their own members. And this is why, in particular, it is concerning to me that these decisions apparently have already been made. And personally, Commissioner Spengler, I disagree with you. I don't think the Conservancy would be this reckless with its statements to the press and to the public. I don't believe that there could be three unambiguous
they probably thought
comments.
they were doing something good,
but
and
with
that the
respect-
public would, and the commissioners would support that, and they've said it, and the commissioners are either going to do it or not do it, and that's when the final decision is made. They're not making the decision. They can't make the decision, but that was their goal. That was a good goal. And if they accomplish
You seem
it...
to have a very clear impression as to the Conservancy's motivations and goals here, Commissioner Spengler, and I think I already asked whether or not there had been any promises extended to members of the Conservancy.
Mr. Sherry, at this point, look, I would like you to wrap up your comments, because this is public comment. You know, it's not public inquisition, okay? You have a right to make your opinions known, and you've done that.
Well, again, it's not just, though, the Willows Cottage that is a concern. I have here a copy of the Conservancy's most recent newsletter. It came out, it's a little bit ambiguous as to when it comes out, but it's in summer of 2009. And there's a section here with respect to the Willows Cottage, and in particular, the CSA farm. There's sort of a symbiotic relationship between the two. There's just a picture of it. It can be zoomed in, but I'll read from one particular highlighted section. It states that the CSA farm aspect is a pilot program that we hope will be expanded through the acquisition of additional township land, again, at no expense to the taxpayer. So we're talking here, again, about giving away more and more township land. And when it comes to township land, and when it comes to township buildings, and the decisions that you all are authorized to make, not the Radnor Conservancy, not Greener Partners, not the Friends of the Willows Cottage, it is my belief that those discussions should be made whenever possible, in fact, required by law, in public, so that there is transparency on this.
Well, I agree with you, and frankly, that's what we're doing here. And the brief discussion we had before you wanted to make your public comment was, the sense of the board was, we're going to do this in public in September when we have a document to debate and discuss, and it will be made available to the public. And we're not going to vote on it until we have the opportunity to have that document prepared, circulated, and then you're free to come in here and make your comments before we vote. And that was the point that we were trying to, instead of doing this tonight, we're trying to do it when we have the document in September.
And I appreciate that, Commissioner Masterson, and I trust that this will be handled in a transparent manner going forward. My concern was, based on the documents that I've seen, which are available on Radnor's own website, and based on the lease that was entered, based on the comments made by people in the Radnor Conservancy to the
We
press,
didn't enter a lease
that
yet, though.
transparency
Dan.
is not, excuse me.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but we
Yes,
did
Commissioner
not
Palantonio.
enter into a lease. Don't say that, because we have not entered into any lease.
Yes, you have, Commissioner Palantonio.
No,
You entered
I-
into
I
a lease.
haven't
You
signed
entered
anything.
into a lease, Commissioner Palantonio, back in
My
March.
name is Commissioner Paolino.
Palino. I apologize for the
Read it wrong.
mispronunciation.
Good.
However, a lease was entered into back in March. I have it actually right
It's
here. and-
signed?
Yeah, no, we did enter into a
the
lease,
original
and
lease.
they're now coming to us to amend the
amend it.
lease,
But-
to expand
but
the
it's
use.
different.
Commissioner
This
Palino,
isn't for
again,
the
I'm sorry
house.
if I didn't pronounce your name, but here is a copy.
But this
the
isn't
lease.
for the house.
That's correct. And that's
No.
part of the
It's all
point,
about
Commissioner Palino.
extending that lease,
It's the fact that
expanding
these
it.
comments were being made by the Conservancy, unambiguous comments by the Conservancy, before that lease
Had been
was
signed.
entered into.
Okay.
Correct. And
Dan.
subsequent to that lease, but prior to you all voting on it, additional unambiguous comments to, among other things, Philadelphia Inquirer, Philadelphia Daily News, that the farmer is ultimately going to live there. Hence
Well-
my
It's a
concern.
goal.
Dan, I appreciate your comments, and we've set time aside in a meeting in the future to talk about this. So we appreciate everything you stated. I want to thank all volunteers in the township for the hard work they do.
Here, Dan, you can
And I want to
have
thank the
lease.
Friends of the Willows Cottage for all the hard work they've done to save the cottage.
That's just for the land, that's not for the cottage.
My name's Harriet Waldron. I'm at 410 Boxwood Road. And I would like to make a comment, not as a lawyer, because I'm not one, but as a business person. And I've seen this happen more than once here with this Board of Commissioners, where somebody comes to you and wants free land, free use of Radnor land, and you're more than willing to accommodate them with no regard for what I say are the the tax-paying businesses that we have in our township. And in this case, it's primarily the farmer's market and the Acme to some degree. But I mean, what's going on there? Do we need a live-in farmer for 2 acres of land? I mean, come on, guys, let's be honest here. I know they've done a lot of work on the cottage, but that was their decision to do. They also sell things from that cottage, and your picture right here shows that, unless this is a picture of another farm somewhere else in the world. But they're selling beef, they're selling eggs, they're selling honey. That does compete against the businesses that pay taxes here. So not only have you given them a place to do business, put up their employees, which we'd all love to be able to do that for free, then they get to sell, and the Radnor Township people make no money, no tax money on that activity. And I think that's something that needs to be considered. And I don't see you all ever consider the businesses in this township other than to raise their taxes. And that was what I would like to say about it. I also feel that something could go wrong. That cottage could burn down and that farmer could die. Who's going to be responsible? Who's going to support that insurance? Who's going to make sure that farmer is checked out with a criminal background check, just like my daughter had to be when she was a swim instructor at Radnor Pool? I mean, I think there's bigger issues here than just they're great friends of yours, but, you know, this is a business we're trying to run here, and it's a township that requires stewardship in a business sense. And I would encourage you all to consider that as you make this decision. Thank you.
Harry, I've never gone over there. They're selling more than stuff that was grown?
That's what their picture says.
Yeah.
Free-range eggs, grass-fed beef, and honey.
Is that,
I mean, isn't that from
John
them?
Rice.
Is that live?
So the,
Same stuff that goes to the members of the CSA, no more, no less.
20 families think that's...
Yeah, but John Rice, is that a violation of the lease for them to be selling something that's other than that's grown there?
Well, if you give me a few minutes, I'll look at the lease.
Okay.
I think you have more public comment, though.
I can actually speak to that in terms of Section 4.
Oh, no
permitted use.
disrespecting, but I'll rely on
Okay,
it.
well, maybe I'll just read it then specifically in case he wants to make an interpretation. Tenant shall use the premises for growing fruits, vegetables, and other crops for sale or distribution to members of a CSA program to be established by the tenant and/or its manager hereinafter defined, as well as for educational programs to be offered to children and adults. That's with respect to growing. Subsection B, in addition, tenant may use the garages for distribution of produce to members of the CSA, as well as to the educational programs to be provided by the tenant or the manager retained by the tenant to operate the CSA, and to the outbuilding for storage. Finally, the tenant shall have the right to plant demonstration gardens in the vicinity of the cottage at locations to be approved by the landlord's director of Parks and Recreation, which approval shall not be unreasonably withheld, conditioned, or delayed. There's nothing about beef. There's nothing about products such as eggs and chicken. There is, with respect to Greener Partners, an updated Flickr account, which is available to the public to view, where they have pictures of this market over at the Willows Cottage. And a number of those pictures clearly show that they are selling, among other things, beef and chicken and eggs.
The lease doesn't address other products brought off-site, sold on there. Quite frankly, I don't know what other products, other than what we've heard tonight, I don't know what other products the Conservancy is selling there. But it only addresses what this gentleman just read, the use of the premises for growing fruits, vegetables, and other crops for sale and distribution. And then there's an additional provision that talks about distribution of produce to members of the CSA as well as educational programs. So it's pretty narrow. It's not specific to things that are brought in off-site.
Chip Layfield, Wayne. What I got from Dan was that it was apparent that the goal, as Bill said, was to have this amendment in the original lease, and that didn't happen. And I assume that happened in negotiations with your council. It was left out. I would urge the board to stay with what you have, keep it as a demonstration project, give it at least a year, see how it does before you amend it. On a personal level, as somebody that's attended quite a few board meetings and Park and Rec board meetings, I think it's farcical that we have John Fisher and John Nagel, who's in the back, shouting out obscenities to people he doesn't agree with. They probably have 2 decades on Park and Rec board. You assign them the responsibility to look out for those resources. And I think the fact that they're here now to save them is despicable.
I agree with you on that one.
Any other public comment on this? Mr. Fisher?
Let me say briefly, I don't want to get into the merits of this, we'll do that next week, but I want to make it categorically clear, as far as I know, no one on the Conservancy has had any conversations with anybody in the Board of Commissioners or anyone in the Township about the use of this property for residential purposes. It has always been our plan and expectation that that would happen. Now, maybe we chose the wrong verbs in some of the materials, because it's always been our plan, but we have no commitment whatsoever from anyone, and that's why we are here for this ordinance. We need the ordinance because we do not have the right to use that property because we don't lease anything other than 2 garages. So I want to make it perfectly clear for the record that we have had no conversations with anybody from the township where the township is committed to make the rest of that property available to us.
I guess, just out of curiosity, why would you be putting in your literature statements that the farmer was going to be moving into this property?
As I said, I think we probably chose the wrong verbs. It's always been our plan. And we've always understood we need township approval to do that. But it seemed like a logical use.
Why didn't you ask for it when the first lease came up?
Well, very simple answer for that. When we entered into the original lease, we had very simple goals and expectations.
And they changed 4 months later?
Yes, because this project has taken off so much faster than we ever thought it would.
It sounds like you're exceeding the bounds of what you're permitted to do there.
No, well, I don't know about that.
That's not success, John. The fact is, if they're selling beef and products that you can go down to the farmer's market, they've exceeded what they're allowed to do.
They're not paying BPT taxes.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that's a whole other issue. I think we do need to address that.
not.
And let's be fair, if that's what's happening, they should have to pay the same
should
business
stop.
privilege. No, hang on. They could pay business privilege tax.
That's not true,
for that.
John. They are paying $1 rent. That's a subsidy. Pay a commercial rate, compete on a commercial level, and be fair about it.
But we have to look at this from a big picture, too. And we have a lot of institutions in this township that use township land for comparable terms. And the question is, at the end of the day, are we going to save the cottage? And my goal is to save the cottage. Now, the Friends of the Willows Cottage and the Conservancy worked to find a solution. They found a solution that seems like it's going to work. They're looking for a partnership. We make the decisions. We're ultimately going to decide if there is a lease and what that lease says. If you're doing something at that site that you shouldn't be doing, you should stop doing it. But the premise of saving the cottage, again, a year ago, we were going to spend $40,000 to demolish a building. The building was in very bad condition. We have a lot of volunteers that have helped save that building, but the building is far from being saved. It still needs a lot more work, and this township doesn't have the revenue or the funding source to solve that problem, nor do we have the will necessarily to solve that problem. We've demonstrated over 20 years that we let the building fall into disrepair. So the question is, can we partner with this group the same way we partner with many other groups? And I don't want to put them on the hot seat now, but there are many other groups in the township that we work with collectively and constructively to solve a problem.
But
And
I
I
don't
think
we're giving them land or structures, and
We-
to operate.
we
on.
have-
That's a big step. And
I don't want to, look, I don't want to open that can,
Well,
but
that's what we're
we
doing.
do.
John, the reality is you don't want to
provide-
open any can except for
what
what's
we're doing.
supporting the position that you want to
No,
take.
no, okay, well, I mean, I don't, like I said,
Wait a minute, you
Well,
don't have
hold
the
on.
floor. You don't have the floor. You don't have the floor. You don't have the
no,
floor.
I think, no, hang on.
Floor,
I
you
think
come
we
up
can
and get
be
the mic
true
whenever
to
you
the, I think we can be true to the taxpayers and true to the township at the same time. I think if we want to save a building that needs about $500,000 to $600,000 of renovations, instead of charging taxpayers for that, if we can enter into partnerships, constructive partnerships that make sense, that are fair to everyone, I think we can reach a resolution here that's fair to everyone. Should the farmer be paying rent? Possibly. I think that's a reasonable assumption. We have other instances where tenants are only paying $1 a year, but in exchange, they're giving us lots of service. So the question is, will we be able to continue that or not? And maybe this means a change across the board, but I believe in partnerships. I stated a year ago, townships and governments are really bad at business enterprise. The last thing you want is your government to run a business.
But
Okay?
that's where they should be looking at private enterprise partnerships, not coming to this board and asking for something for nothing.
But we have many
Like the
nonprofits.
taxpayers.
We have
They're not
many
getting something
nonprofits
for
that work with this. I'll give you an example. The library. What is the rent we charge on the library?
The entire town
It will
does
come
not
down
decide.
to how many people use the Willows as an educational resource. Okay?
You can't speak
Well,
for the audience. You have to get
We
to the
will, again, we have to think big, okay? If we think this is the only thing that's happening in Radnor that's benefiting a few taxpayers, that's wrong, because we have a lot of programs throughout this township that benefit different groups, subgroups. We have many playing fields that cost millions of dollars to maintain, okay? And we do charge a fee for those fields, and that's fair. And we should probably charge a fee for this lease. But the question is, are we getting benefit as taxpayers? I personally think we're getting benefit. I know that at least $100,000 of work has occurred over at that building. I saw it in the beginning, and I see it now, and I know that we didn't take $1 out of our budget to pay for that, and that's a good thing. So,
John, that's an absurd argument. This township runs on volunteers. You got volunteer coaches, you got volunteer firemen. If we had to fund a fire department out of tax revenues, that would be an astronomical cost. Those guys don't come into us asking, can I get a rebate on my taxes because I'm volunteering my time?
Right, and if we had to say, let's get paid our salaries, the rate that we go for, with billable hours as attorneys,
the fact-
we don't get reimbursed.
The fact of the matter is that for the last 10 years, we've been discussing buying a large chunk of our Drossen. And what have we been looking at? How can we keep that as a farm? How can we get a CSA, and what can we do? This is an incubation project for our master vision that we had for our Drossen that we've been discussing for 10 years about what can we do with that land. We don't want it to be ball fields. We want it to be hayed. We want it to be vegetable gardens. We want it to be cow. We wanted to keep it rural when we buy a large section of our Drossen farms that the voters voted for on a bond issue. And this CSA is an incubation of something that's very creative and it's very positive, for Radnor Township. And the fact of the matter is that we were going to look at tearing down the building. And that building was worth saving. I wasn't going to vote to tear it down, but the manager was recommending, and the staff were recommending we tear it down. So that if we're not going to tear it down, we have to come up with a creative use for it. What can we do there? What can we do there? And we came up with this very unique thing. And it's tremendous for Radnor Township. And I'm 100% in support of it. And I think the overwhelming majority of people of Radnor are in support of that. And I don't think we're going to have 100 or 200 people at the next meeting speaking against that. We're going to have the same 4 or 5 people out speaking against. How many phone calls have you gotten in the last month since the last meeting about this?
But
how many phone calls have you gotten from your ward?
I got none. But Bill,
All right,
it's rather disingenuous, in my opinion, to come in here in March and ask for a lease under certain terms, get what you want, and come back 4 months later and ask for something different when it's been admitted that's been your goal all along.
I want to speak to that. I think, as being in business 20 years, things change. You can write a business plan, and you know what? A week later, you're rewriting that business plan because you don't know what's going to happen. You can have aspirations. There's nothing wrong with aspirations.
But John,
now,
they've admitted
it's
it didn't change.
presumptive. It's presumptive on their part to put it in writing that their intention is to have the farmer live there. If I had written the document, would I have written it differently? Probably, right? I didn't write the document. I don't know. But the point is, this is a group that really is trying to do some good here. And we can vilify them, or we can say, let's look at it objectively and look at all the other volunteer organizations in this township that do good things for low tax dollars. And we see it across the board. We see the library. We give them a building for $1 a year, I guess it is, and we spend $8,000 to restore the bathroom. Okay, that's what we're going to be doing. Here's a case where the tenant is not only doing good things in terms of services like the library, but they're also going to take care of the bathroom for us. They're going to pay for the replacement of the toilet and the sink. And that's a great thing. So they're in a position where they can get those things done. I just don't want to see, if this doesn't work, then we're back to where we were a year ago, which is basically tearing the building down. Because I can't think, I mean, everyone collectively tried to come up with a better use, and there just didn't seem to be anything that worked, because if you try to put a business there that has lots of traffic, everyone complains. If you leave it vacant, it falls in disrepair. So we need to find something that works for everyone, and it should be fair and equitable for all taxpayers. I'm hoping the education programs that are there will be that, okay? Just like some parents take their kids to the library, some kids will go to the camp there and learn about gardening and farming. And I can tell you, it's a very interesting topic to me, and if I had young kids, that's what I would be doing. So to dismiss it as all bad or vilify the people that are trying to do it, I don't think that's fair. I think we can be critical of what's happening and the way we instrument it, but to be critical of the people that volunteer their time, I don't think that's fair, because that's counterproductive. I personally went there and scraped paint. I don't expect anyone to pay me or pat me on the back, okay? The rest of the volunteers have basically reworked the building, okay? What they don't need is slap in the face. They need a thank you, and maybe they don't need free rent, okay? But they need to be at least held up high and thanked for the work they do. And if we send this message that we're going to pull the rug out from anyone that tries, we're doomed. Because every volunteer organization in the township will fail. Every volunteer group in the township will fail.
No one's asking to cancel the lease. They're asking to amend the lease and get more.
They're victims of success, and I've seen this in business. You do really well, and all of a sudden, the terms of your agreement don't make sense anymore. You need to expand on it slightly.
Kevin,
in this case,
let me just respond to why. I don't want to get into the merits. I know you guys want to end this discussion, but right now the lease covers the 2 garages. The goal has always been to restore the entire building. Well, we don't lease the entire building, so it's difficult to restore a building that we don't control. So the 2 principal reasons we need this amendment is to enable us to retrofit and rehab the rest of the building, and also to do serious fundraising. We have reached a stage now, somebody mentioned it, $500,000. Well, that's the number to rehab this building. And we need to, at this point, to go out and do some serious fundraising. And you can't do serious fundraising if you say, well, the only 2 rooms we control are the 2 garages.
John, I would need to think about this more. But I'm not necessarily opposed to leasing you the entire building. What I am opposed to is letting you have a farmer reside there, because that's a government subsidy. And I am very much opposed, and I find it problematic that if it is true that you're selling something other than what was grown at the CSA, you've gone outside the scope of the lease already. You are competing with the businesses in this township, whether you want to accept that or not. Because people, before they went and got their vegetables there, they got them someplace else. And people who buy the beef there got it someplace else. I can't believe people are eating more. It's possible, but they either went to the farmer's market or
If that's an issue to
butcher.
the township, as I said, I think Greener Partners sells 3 or 4 other products that they've developed from other sources. They're trying to cut their losses at the farm, as well as we are. So if
they're not
that's an
permitted
issue to
to do
the
that.
township, we'll stop it. I don't think it's competitive because there are only 3 or 4 products. So I think the farmer's market is.
John, if you don't buy it there, would you buy it someplace else?
You may or may not.
That's,
All right, let's just move on.
Well, John, does that mean we're not going to open another restaurant in Radnor because we already have 7?
no, Bill, that's a private enterprise. Anybody could open a restaurant in Radnor Township. I have no issue with that. Go out, fight it out, compete on a fair basis. When you pay a buck rent for
Another
use of a
analogy
government
is,
property,
well, the other
that's not
analogy
fair.
could be that we shouldn't have a library because then the bookstores would go out of business. So, we have to be careful. I don't think they should be selling products other than what are grown on the site. I think that's really important to differentiate. But from what I understand, CSAs have a really rough go of it. It's not a profitable business to enter into. If we're lucky, the thing will break even and help rebuild the cottage. And if they wanted to supplement that income by selling products, then they need to come for a license just like anyone else does, and they should pay rent at that point. But, I think in general terms, I want everyone to have an open mind about this. I haven't made up my decision about what I think should happen with the lease. So for my vote, I haven't decided if the lease that we are going to get will in fact be the right lease. I think we have to be careful that we encourage this type of volunteerism and this type of rebuilding and not discourage it. But we also have to be careful not to give away the farm on the taxpayer's bill.
Hi, I just want to make a quick comment. I am Elaine Schaefer. I am on the steering committee for this whole initiative. I'm on the board of the Radnor Commissioners. I'm one of the people who's worked, the Radnor Conservancy. And I'm one of the people that worked to get this whole initiative started. And one thing I would really like to clear up is the misinformation or the misunderstanding about what this whole project provides for our township. And several times we keep hearing 25 families, 25 families. And there's a very small minority of people who are very vocal about having concerns here. And I want to tonight just remind you all and quantify how many people and how well received this project has been. Because we've worked on a lot of projects in the last 7 years. Nothing has ever received this kind of response. It has been astounding, really. And to quantify it, I just want to give you an idea of some of the groups and some of the numbers of the people who have been involved and participated in this exciting project. We have had, from the high school, 75 seniors came out and participated for an entire day, did their community service project. They're working all day in the fields. From the middle school, the watershed class, and all of those families have been involved from the get-go, almost on a weekly basis when school was in session. The Haverford School students have been out, about 15 of them. Villanova University students, about 20 of them have been out on more than one occasion. We've even gotten the president of Villanova University has personally reached out to us because he wants to see more participation and a bigger partnership with Villanova University. We had realtors from Long and Foster, 40 of them, come out and volunteer at the Willows Cottage and on the farm. We had 500 people buy tickets to come to the farm at the hoedown and see what it's all about and participate in that way. We've had over 180 people come on Saturday mornings for volunteer time and our surplus market. We've had 30 children and area families participate in camps. We've had 40 people come to our educational, our first two educational things, a rain barrel workshop and a composting workshop. And we had 80 people come out to the first informational session, which was a showing of Fridays at the Farm. It is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who are excited about this, who have, we had 90 families give us money. We have 190 volunteers on our email list who want to be notified every week what volunteer opportunities have. So lest we get muddled down by this small minority of people who are very vocal and don't like this project, please know that there's a very, very enthusiastic silent majority out there who has been just vociferous in their support of us and this project and what it's going to do for our township and the wonderful benefits that it's bringing to us. So I just wanted to end this discussion
Has
on that
Villanova
note.
offered to house the farmer rent-free?
Well, we haven't asked him,
Why
but we
don't you
actually
ask
did
them?
approach Villanova. We did, and they did not have any housing when we were looking for housing. And it's actually not rent-free. I want to clarify that. He will pay rent. He would definitely pay rent. He pays rent now, and he would pay.
To whom?
I'm not really sure. I mean, we would work that out. And of course, all of these things need to be worked out. Nothing is decided. These are all plans. We plan big at the Radnor Conservancy. And we've done a pretty good job of getting people to come along with us and make a difference in this community.
Well, I
So-
admire everything that the Conservancy's done. I will say, I've always had problems all along with the propaganda, the written propaganda that has gone out throughout the township, which sometimes misled residents as to what your agenda was or what your plans were. I think you put the cart before the horse, and Mr. Fisher could call it verbiage or whatever you want to call it. To me, it's just misleading information, and I would urge you to be very cautious because it assumes or makes the public assume that we have already gave you the blessing to do whatever you want to do over there.
Well,
And
that is certainly
that may not
the case.
necessarily be the case.
It
and
is not the
hasn't been
case in this instance. It is certainly not the case. So anyway, I wanted to end this discussion on that note, knowing that this has really been an incredibly well-received program, and we've raised a lot of money. We've raised and spent $50,000 cash on this already, and over $180,000 worth of services and in-kind donations to that. So it's been a home run of a public project, public-private, nonprofit partnership. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. You really don't need to beat a dead horse. I mean, really, we're going to...
I won't beat the dead horse. Can I
Well,
just
but,
take
no, let me just say,
30
look,
seconds?
you have made your comments very strongly. We're going, please,
I understand, sir, but
I'm going to ask you to do me a favor, okay? Because if you want to have an opportunity to participate in the public discussion when the ordinance is on the table, you'll have that. But if you're going to abuse the privilege tonight, we already decided we're going to put this off till September, but you wanted to make your presentation, and you did. Now, you had an opportunity. I'm going to ask you to sit down now, okay? I'm done. I'm going to ask you to sit down. No, no more.
Comment. Am I allowed
No.
to readdress this issue at public comment
Yes.
tonight at the end?
No, we're done, okay? We're done. And I'm going to ask you to sit down, because we've talked about this to death, and we're going to talk about it again in September.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda under Park and Rec is the Pennsylvania Conservation Grant application with the Radnor Conservancy. Is there a discussion on that?
Mr. Chairman, the administration was approached by the Conservancy to submit an application to the state for a 100% grant for improvements at the cottage. I believe they are all for the, give me a minute, I've got a brain dead. Geothermal heating system.
Pardon me?
They're for a geothermal heating system at the cottage. It's a 100% grant program. The Conservancy put together a program. The application requires the support of the board if you're interested in having somebody make an asset improvement to the township at no cost.
Well, would that be something that would be appropriate to consider after we decide what we're going to do about this lease amendment?
Yes and no. Number one is the structure. If you want to protect the structure in the long term, I would think you'd want to provide some type of heat to it. Secondly, the application needs to be into the state tomorrow, but that doesn't mean that you can't submit another application the next time the grants are open, probably this time next year.
Just to be clear, John, there's nothing by going forward with this that obligates us in any way to amend the lease, and this would be a viable project if the lease stood as it stands today.
That's my understanding, but you need to ask those guys. I
That
mean,
is
I look
also-
at it as an improvement to an asset of the township that needs to be protected. It needs some heat in there, and if you can reduce your expenses, your operating expenses, if somebody's going to give you 100% of the money to do that, I'm missing the reason not to move
Right, and they're
forward
only
with
asking
this.
for time and effort on staff's part.
I didn't do anything.
Money in the grant.
And I meant, but this application.
Yes.
Yeah, well, the application, the Conservancy will do the majority of the work and the staff will review it. But there's also money in the grant for the staff's time to administer the grant.
Okay.
So this is a win-win. There's no match
Yeah, I don't-
required from the town. The Conservancy and the Friends of Willows have committed about $35,000 to this project if we get the grant. And it's
What is the dollar amount of the grant? Application?
$245,000. And that includes, it's not just geothermal, it's insulation, it's
Windows.
windows, and all the stuff done in a historically correct manner because, as you know, we've submitted the entire Willows to the state for historical recognition.
I'll move the approval of the grant application.
Second?
Sure.
Yes?
I'm sorry, Jim Steller, I'm a resident. I feel I have to make a comment because of this latest item. I think that the board has to remember, I was present at all the meetings, and this really was a wonderful volunteer effort in the beginning. In other words, certain people were coming out of concern for the historic nature of the property and offering their time and really giving services. Craftsmen, and people were doing basic things to make sure the property didn't really fall apart last winter. But if you allow this, it seems like the geothermal even involves windows, it sounds extensive, and if you allow it before the lease issue is resolved, you're going to be allowing one party to get in favor or get in deeper as far as being intricately involved with the premises before a lease is even agreed on. And by the way,
I think it would provide renovations to the property regardless of what we decide on the lease.
And it's a Radnor Township grant, it's not a Radnor Conservancy grant.
That's just my take on it, Jim.
That's fine.
well, I still think it's affecting the basis for the lease, especially with some opposition apparently having been made.
Thanks.
And also, I wanted to point out that this amendment says allowing a portion of the second floor of the building and the first floor, apparently, for residents, and that includes for any intern employed to assist with cultivation. And I think everyone has to take a look at if a farmer had...
Jim, we're on the grant application. You got to
Yeah,
stay with the
okay.
grant application.
I'll give you one paragraph. If a farmer and an intern, but
That's not the grant
a
application.
farmer at any rate, are in this premises, to what extent does that ruin the experience as opposed to benefit it? Thank you.
Okay.
Move for the approval?
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that completes Park and Rec, Public Health,
No report?
Public Safety.
First item on public safety is a staff traffic committee report. You have before you the report of the committee from July 21st, 2009 meeting. Any questions or comments?
John, on the Windermere Avenue, one of the problems was Lieberts and Crocker not be getting out of their driveway because people park on both sides of their driveways and all.
Yes, as we noted, we had discussion that particular morning, and there are some inconsistencies with the widths between the driveways. Namely, between one of the sets of driveways, there's only approximately 12 feet, and it does not support the 20-foot length that you need for a parking zone. So some of those areas are going to have to be marked out for no parking to accommodate those people, because it does not support it.
Yeah, well, the two issues were Crocker and Lieber getting out of their driveway, and the other one was the Alda First getting out of her driveway next to St. Catherine's School.
That's correct.
So those are the two that you should look at.
We have those on the map.
Okay, thank you. Move the approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The next item on the agenda is Resolution 2009-30, which deals with the Mainline Chamber of Commerce 5K Fun Run and Walk on Saturday, September 26, 2009. And this resolution would request that we authorize Township Manager to send a request to PennDOT in order to close Lancaster Avenue for that period of time on September 26th.
Move to approve.
Second?
All those in favor?
The next item is Resolution 2009-32 regarding the Wayne Business Association Annual Fall Festival. Again, this is a resolution which would authorize the manager to request that PennDOT close down North Wayne Avenue from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. on September 20th, 2009 to accommodate the Fall Festival.
Move the approval?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Next item is ordinance number 2009-16, which is up for adoption. And this would provide for the installation of 4 no parking by order fire marshal on the north side of the private driveway where it meets Cromer Road at the Radnor Township property. That's the Public Works Facility at 235 Lancaster Avenue.
Move the adoption?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. The next is introduction of ordinance number 2009-18, which would modify the parking restriction time on Bloomingdale Avenue from Conestoga Road to a distance of 347 feet. Presently, it's only 306 feet, and it would be a prohibited parking in that area.
Move the introduction?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. The next item is ordinance number 2009-19, also up for introduction, which would establish a speed limit on Bellevue Avenue between West Avenue and West Lancaster Avenue at 25 miles per hour.
Move the introduction?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. That's it for public safety.
Public Works and Engineering.
The first item is the resolution 2009-29, Coronum Associates LP to demolish existing restaurant and construct an addition to the existing commercial building, add associated parking and eliminate property line at 222 Sugartown Road, Devon Square Shopping Center, a portion of Radnor Township. And Dan, they've agreed to all the conditions?
Yes, sir. I have a signed affidavit to that.
All right, I'll move the approval of the resolution.
Do we have-
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I'm sorry, is this about the
You got to come to the mic. You can't talk from the audience. You can't talk from the audience.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the Devon Square Shopping Center matter that's been in front of us at the last few meetings.
I'm sorry, it appears Jim Schneller, resident.
No, you can't.
Oh, wrong. I haven't seen a copy of the resolution. Can I ask the board, does it have any conditions?
Yeah.
Here, you can have a copy. All the conditions there.
Is the resolution in the back, on the back table?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't see one there. But it had great attendance tonight, for an August meeting especially. I don't see, and I don't want to nitpick, but there is a 2-inch difference in level of the bridge over the culvert. And I had been asking that they might make a condition that that be honed down. It's the sidewalk along Sugartown Road. But more important, if I could ask the board for a condition, this has been nebulously at times and then apparently rather firmly based on Tredifferen's, or at least on a statement that a pad on the Tredifferen side on Lancaster Pike was not going to be developed. As you know, there's a new bank there next to Eckerd's, but that's on this property. And there was a possible plan for development of another pad next to Devon Square's driveway approximately for some kind of a small office building. And the parking here, I've been trying to emphasize, is really at the point where it could go bad. And apparently the Planning Commission took favor to this because of the lack of a different project. So if a condition could be said in the statement that this is depending on the fact that there is no other project on the premises. Otherwise, they could feasibly bounce the ball back a year later and say, well, now we wish to build on Lancaster Pike as well. Thank you. Is that feasible, by the way? Do you think you could add that condition?
No.
On ground interdifferent?
On the fact that no further proposal be made for the property?
No, that can't be added, Jim.
Thank you.
Yep, it's already passed. The next item is bid for repair of sanitary sewer line on Pembroke Avenue. Bids were open, and the low bidder was Pro Pipe of Exton, the amount of $61,950,000. The amount approved in the current capital budget for this project is $100,000. So I move the approval to Pro Pipe for $61,950.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next item is the award of the bid for line striping. We had 4 bidders. The low bidder was PX Incorporated for $5,037.20, and I'll move the approval.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
All right. The next item is the bid for purchase of diesel fuel, gasoline, and lubricants. There were 5 bidders on the fuel, and the recommendation is Kraft Oil. Diesel fuel to Riggins Incorporated, and lubricants be awarded to Kraft Oil Company as low bidders, and I move the approval.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I just had a question for the future, John, Bill, or Bill Hagan. You gave us the unit cost, but you don't kind of project how many units are going to be used. And Kraft Oil, at least in one instance, was a higher price point on one item. I suspect when you weigh it all in and you multiply it out, it's at the lowest point, but I don't know that for a fact.
That's correct on that. And as far as the fuel and the gasoline, we require all the bidders to pull off the rack price out of the Philadelphia on a certain date. So basically, they're bidding on overhead or profit margin. What you'll see there is the rack rate price plus the money they want to make on the sale per gallon, and that's how it's decided.
But again, I'm going to accept on the basis of the fact that you did the math, but how do I know from looking at this that we don't use a significantly more amount of motor oil relative to all the other four other items that Kraft competed against for REIT, if I said it accurately?
If you want that tabulation, I can try and put it together.
But it would just be useful so I have it, Bill, so I can just know it next time.
In the future, if you'd like the tabulation sheet with the bid approval, I can do that for you.
Okay, thank you.
The next item is the award of the bid for library bathroom updates, fixtures in the Radnor Memorial Library. There were 3 bidders. Low bidder was Moretta Plumbing Incorporated for $714.22, and I'll move the approval.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Next item is award for de-icing salt. We had 5 bidders, and the low bidder was Ocean Port Industries for $65.83 per ton, and I'll move the approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that's it under Public Works and Engineering.
Any old business? Any new business?
No.
Well, we're going to have
No,
public
public
comment. We're doing old business, Commissioner old business, Commissioner new. Pardon me?
No, then public comment. Yep.
Yeah. Right.
Yep.
Okay. No old business, any new business?
I have some new business.
Okay.
I'd like to announce tonight that this will be my last meeting as the commissioner in Radnor Township. And for many reasons, one of them being my daughter back there and my nephew. That's my family comes first for me. And after 10 years, I realized that it's time for a change and for me to focus on being with my family. My son's in Florida and my daughter's up here, so I have to be bi-coastal. I have to be in 2 places in order to be with my family. I'd like to thank the community for their support over the years. I'd like to tell those who did not support me and who ravaged my family's reputation and my personal reputation, thank you, sweetheart, over the internet, that down the line, when you take over this job or in hopes of getting involved deeply into politics, that you're tough enough and rough enough to take the heat, because it's difficult, not only on your personal life, but your professional life. And there are a lot of times I didn't agree with members of this board, and I stood on principle on a lot of things. I voted against this building. I was the one who pushed this board into bringing in an investigator to go through our issues with the comp time and our liabilities involving the comp time and reviewing our township manager. If I hadn't pushed for that, it would have never gotten done. So I know it will never go recognized, and people can say what they want, but it needs to be made public that, you know, I did not only take care of my home, my children, my family, but I did take care of this community for a long, long time. It's time to move on. I'm engaged to Michael Zambello, and we intend to travel the world and work on a project that involves musical diplomacy, and I'm looking forward to a new future, one that's going to bring me closer to my family. And I do think that after this struggle with everything that's happened in the community, new blood on both this board and on the volunteer boards will be something very positive. I do, you know, I will say that next election is going to be a challenge for both parties, and neither party should blame the other party for anything that's happened over these past years, because, for example, the president who served ran unopposed. So both parties supported him. So you can't blame any one party for anything that has happened. Everybody tried to do their best over the years, and you know, some things worked out, some things didn't. But I will say that it's been a pleasure working for the 5th Ward. It was an amazing opportunity running for the Senate. I can't tell you how difficult it was, and again, how rough and tough you need to be, and I challenge anybody in this room to try and do it, because it's difficult. And I thank the support of my family, because I would never have been able to do it without them. And I am the first woman who was ever elected to serve on this board. I do miss my colleague, Ann Michelle Higgins. She was the second, and I wish she were here tonight. I think of her often, Kevin. I do miss her. And one of the, you know, reasons, you know, in the back of my mind for making this choice too is it's hard being up here without having another comrade, and it's been a fight every step of the way. So I'm hoping to see, hopefully, more women get involved. You know, Harriet Waldron, a very tough lady, you know, I'm in the military for years, a professional businesswoman. I trust that she's going to be a fabulous candidate for the 4th Ward. I'm sure they'll come up with some good candidates in the 5th Ward. I know Mr. Nagel, who has been out there vocally spreading all kinds of vicious rumors about me and my family because he has nothing better to do with his time, will probably run. And I urge you, you know, to use caution, because as Mr. Sherry said, you know, a lot of these people that are on these special interest groups, whether it be Conservancy or sports groups or educational foundations, they've gotten themselves very ingrained, and you need new life and new blood if you want to move forward into the new decade. And 2010's coming, and it's time for major changes. So I wish everybody well. I wish the rest of this board well. I wish everybody health and happiness. And as I said, you know, I hope that people will understand that what they put on the internet is vicious towards people and their families and their children. And my daughter was a victim of very vicious people in this community, and she suffered for it, and she paid dearly.
all because I chose to serve this community. So again, you're going to be looking for a new township manager, and that gentleman's going to come in here and he's going to card his family and his kids. And, you know, the minute somebody starts blogging on the internet, you know, something about his inadequacies, he's going to pack up and head for the hills. So, you know, please be respectful of each other and what you say and how you conduct yourselves. You know, it's a terrible, terrible thing to, you know, have people, just because you're a politician and you're fair game, write, you know, propaganda, lies, attacks. If you have something to say, you have a public podium here, come out here, stand up here face to face and say it. You want to hide behind a screen name and have an internet handbag fight with each other, go ahead and do it. But we have this public forum, and we put hours in, this whole board, hours and hours of our lives away from our family with very little money. People writing letters because I was sick with chronic bronchitis that I should give the money back because I missed a few meetings over 10 years of service. Well, guess what? The money that I got paid couldn't pay my cell phone, postage, or paper that I had to use to do my job. So, you know, the ridiculous remarks that people made and the hurtful things that they said, I'll forgive them. But I will leave you with, you know, best wishes for a prosperous 2010. I think under new management and new blood and, you know, new active members in the community that are going to come out and do great things, this township will be, you know, tops in the territory. It always was. We're just suffering a little bit of a setback now, but I think, you know, we're going to come back bigger and better and stronger. So I wish everybody well, and thank you all. And thank you to my lovely daughter. And I wish my son could be here tonight, but he comes home tomorrow for his birthday. Then my nephew's back there, Christopher Palino, and again, my family. I'm Italian American and proud of it, and you know, it takes a very, very strong family to stand behind a woman that, you know, took the chance and bit the bullet and ran against their own party to try and get a Senate seat for Radnor Township. It wasn't about me. It was about Radnor Township. And although, you know, I lost, it was the best experience of my life, and I couldn't have done it without the support of my family and my dear friends. So thank you to everybody.
On behalf of the board, Lisa, thank you for your service. 10 years on the board is quite an investment of time, and I know it has been difficult at times, and you've always persevered, and I respect you for that. And you've always made your positions clear and strong, and I respect that as well, and I wish you well.
Thank you.
Lisa, I'd just like to say, on behalf of myself, thanks, A, for the advice you gave me, thanks for the time and effort you put into it, and to express my appreciation for the concern and support you've given to my two daughters.
Lisa,
I'm there for you, Kevin.
also, I want to thank you personally, thank you for your service to the community. I think it is really important to realize that this is a volunteer position, and it's a part-time position, but ends up usually being full-time, and you've served 10 years for the community, so thank you. Thank you very much.
Did you want to? Okay.
My name again is Christina Peroni. I just want to thank you, Commissioner, for what you did and your service to the community. You were oftentimes one of the few people that would be encouraging of my comments. You know, I think you had the same goal in mind to go and try and bring out some transparency and to bring out the truth, and you were fighting a tough crew. There was a very tough crew here that wanted to withhold the truth. There were some people that wanted to withhold the truth, and I've just read that document that was put forth, and there's amazing information in it, and I thank you for whatever you did to make that happen and for your support of me over the years. I thank you very much. It is tough being sometimes a woman fighting some tough inner circles. So I thank you and wish you tons of luck.
Thank you.
Any other new business? Any other public participation?
Good evening again. Best wishes to you, Commissioner Paolino.
Diane Edbrill, 205 Spruce Tree Road. There are two matters I wanted to bring up. One of them, I guess, was regarding the forensic audit, which is either still in the process or completed. I know that there have been some requests from members of the public through the Right to Know law for copies of the report. I believe the response has been that it does not exist at this time. And I'm just wondering whether there's a timeline for the completion of the forensic audit regarding all the matters that the township has been, sort of discovering and focusing in on over the last several months.
Mr. Rice, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. I spoke with Mark Allis, the company that's doing the audit today. Spoke with him a couple of days last week. They're waiting for some more information, and they expect that they should have that information and they'll be able to complete their report in the next 2 weeks. So there's information that they've had to get from other sources other than the township. They're waiting for that. So there is no report. It hasn't been completed yet. When it's completed, it'll be available for release. I know there's been a couple requests, request 30 or 40 days ago for it, right after they were appointed. So it's taken longer than I think anybody sitting up there thought it would take, but as of today, I'm being told it's a couple more weeks.
Well, I'm certainly glad to hear that the intention of the township is to make it available to the public. I was going to say that, despite the fact that there might be reasons under the Right to Know law not to make it public, I'm really encouraged to hear that it is the intention of the township to make it public, because I think it's a really important step in moving the township forward. And I'm going to not really go to the more extensive remarks about why it would be a mistake to not make it public. I'll save those for a sad day should the position that Mr. Rice articulated change. Then the only other thing I wanted to talk about was lawyers. I love talking about lawyers, as you all know, because I am one, and have played one on television even. It's my understanding that Mr. Rice's firm is currently retained by the township on an interim basis. And it's also my understanding that at the last meeting, the township retained the Economides law firm to handle a few leftover cases that David Blake had been handling, but then lost the ability to handle. So that's also an interim basis. Is that a correct understanding of our current council situation? So I guess then the next step at some point is that the township is going to make a decision about retaining regular counsel on a permanent basis as opposed to the interim basis. And I just want to remark that while I am quite sure that Mr. Economides and his law firm provide excellent legal services, I think that for beyond these few little matters that he's handling, I believe it's 5 cases that need to be tied up, I think that it would be a real mistake to even consider anyone who's so involved in local politics as Mr. Economides. My understanding is that while he's not currently listed as a member of the Radnor Republican Committee as a committee person, that he had held that role in the past. I certainly don't need to remind you all, but maybe people in the public don't recall that Mr. Blake had formerly been the chairman of the Radnor Republican Committee. And I think that in light of everything that's been going on here over the last number of years that are just now coming to light, that sticking with an excellent law firm that is providing really solid legal services that is quite removed both geographically and politically from the heart of Radnor Township would be a very, very wise decision to make when you do make the decision to select attorneys to represent us on a non-interim basis. And though I had plenty more to say tonight, the hour is late, so I'll save it for another night. Good evening, you all.
Thank you.
Dan Cherry, don't worry, I'm not going to be talking about the proposed amendment, Mr. Masterson. I would like, however, to just make a couple comments about this lease. Again, not the lease amendment, but the lease itself, based on some comments that came up tonight. I'm sorry if that doesn't meet with your approval, Commissioner Spengler. But no, I believe I stated quite clearly I wasn't going to talk about the amendment. This lease, again, if I could have the camera zoom in on it, has a provision that I think deserves some discussion and also some discussion about compliance. It's section 11, titled Liability Insurance. It says indemnity. If that, yeah, I think that's supposed to be indemnity, but it says indemnity. And it talks about, I just moved that right off there. Forgive me. If that could be zoomed in. It talks about an insurance policy that the Radnor Conservancy is supposed to have in effect. And it calls for $2 million of insurance coverage for each single instance of personal injury and $1 million with respect to property damage. My first question is, since, I'll pull this back here, one of the requirements of the lease is that the Conservancy, quote, shall provide and maintain a comprehensive policy of insurance, of liability insurance with respect to the premises. Whether or not that policy has been obtained and been produced to this board?
I don't think anybody sitting here is going to be able to answer that question tonight, but if you make a request tomorrow, we will honor it then.
So no, my question is a little bit more broad. We don't even know if you guys have it?
Well, I'm assuming it was filed back in March, but I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't think the commissioners would know unless Mr. Granger knows off the top of his head. Okay. Sort of an unfair question at 10:30 at night, but we'll produce it if it's here, Mr. Sherry. I'm assuming it's here. If it's not here, we will get it from the Radnor Conservancy.
I would hope so, but I don't think it's an unfair question because it does have to do with personal injury. That's actually one of my bailiwicks.
I agree, and it's a requirement. And it needs to be produced, and the township needs to be an additional insured.
Indeed, particularly because we found out tonight that other provisions of that lease might not be complied with. One thing in particular, though, with respect to this insurance coverage amount, which is $2 million, if the Conservancy is going to be permitted to sell things like beef and chicken and eggs, that might be necessary then to increase the insurance limit. I don't know if $2 million covers it, and this actually leads to a broader discussion as to whether or not the township...
Excuse me, you're supposed to be addressing the commissioners. Could you look this way instead of that way? You know? It's like you're addressing the staff. You know, you're supposed to be addressing the commissioners.
Okay, well, I'll address you then. I
Thank you, I appreciate
Commissioner Spengler, I don't want to upset you. But the issue as to whether or not this township may have a liability, particularly if food products such as beef and chicken and eggs are being sold, is something that I don't know has been examined, but ought to, particularly if the Conservancy is going to be permitted to make those sales. One of the things that I've personally been confused about, and perhaps at the next Board of Commissioners meetings, the solicitor, like I guess I'm not allowed to look at, could potentially speak to, is whether or not there is exposure for the township. As I understand it, the township, for most things, is protected by sovereign immunity, by the Political Subdivision Tort Claims Act, although there are exceptions, one of which involves real estate. And I'm concerned as to whether or not what's going on with Greener Partners in the Radnor Conservancy could potentially have an effect on that liability. And I think that's something that should be addressed, again, particularly if potentially dangerous isn't the right word, but I'll say food that has the potential to spoil rapidly and dangerously is going to be sold at a publicly owned building like the Willows Cottage. Thank you.
Any other public participation?
Good evening. My questions tonight are regarding the report that I received last month, which was a report prepared by Neil Morris, which was a legal review of employee compensation related issues, which is what Commissioner Paolino was speaking about, an investigation that was done by Neil Morris. Now, that was released last month, but yet I didn't see it on the agenda and was wondering, do you plan to have an agenda, topic to talk about this report?
We had not, no, that has not been suggested. The report basically reflects much of the information that was discussed publicly by Mr. Morris earlier in the year, and it's pretty self-explanatory.
There are other issues in the report and recommendations, 2 or 3 pages of recommendations of things that should be done to protect the taxpayers from such situations happening again. And so given the fact that, and I recognize that you all have a lot of things on your plate, given that we paid, I don't know, I think $100,000 or so for this report, I think it's worthwhile reading. There are 5 or 6 pages of recommendations and actions that this report is calling for the Board of Commissioners to do to protect the taxpayers. So I'm not asking for anybody to comment on that right now, but I would just make that, I don't know if everybody's read this report, but there are recommendations and actions that should be taken by the board. And so since we paid for it, and I think they made sense to me. So I would ask that you put that on the agenda at some point to have a conversation about it, because there are really good recommendations to protect from this ever happening again. So, okay, that was one point. My next point is just given the fact that the township and the taxpayers paid so much money for it, I think a brief summary of some of the findings I think would benefit the taxpayers. For overview purposes, this report was enacted because there was information about an unfunded vacation, sick, and comp time. And basically, the quick summary version of that issue was that there were specific rules in place, the administrative code, which mandated how much time could be carried over. Mr. Bayshore, as was clearly stated in this report, wrote basically a manual, an employee manual that changed those rules. That was not approved by anybody and therefore was not really in effect. But what he did by saying that we could carry over more time was he then started a secret list of information that said how much time was going to be carried over. So I think that given that this secret list is what we as taxpayers are paying for, this $3.7 million or $3.8 million of liability was basically just on Mr. Bayshore's computer and secretly tabulated. And the only time it was discovered was when Ms. Cuthbertson discovered, after he had been doing this for several years, found that he was actually keeping the secret list and not accounting for this money. So one of the recommendations is what you're supposed to do with that information. So I would strongly urge this board to take a look at the recommendations regarding that issue. And it also speaks to the issue of Mr. Bayshore and his secret inner circle. He had an inner circle of people, it says, that he took care of. He gave them extra bonus money. He gave them extra salary money. He gave them extra comp time. He kept his inner circle close and tight to him. And anybody who was working from the outside knew this and saw it all the time, because we would ask for information and there would be this very tight protection around Mr. Bayshore when anything was asked. In reality, it turns out that that was done because he was doing things wrong and he was giving away money that he wasn't allowed to do. Reading from one of the summary versions was to get around this, he unilaterally and secretly created a new form of compensation he entitled special lump sum payments, so he could attempt to circumvent the bonus limits. The only plausible reason and explanation for this was that it was done as part of a premeditated plan by the township manager to keep these acts and this information from the Board of Commissioners. So I think we should make clear that this report is very damning of Mr. Bayshore, that he was very premeditated in his actions, and the fact that he now has the nerve to sue the township I find just outrageously appalling. And it also goes on to say, the next sentence, he was able to do this because of the historic lack of oversight of the manager. Now, it says spanning multiple decades in boards, but in reality, he was only manager from 2000 to 2009. So it wasn't decades. And it also says that this accrual started to increase dramatically fourfold once he became manager. So that was one particular issue that I think is worth bringing out into public, that he calculated this and took care of his inner circle. The next issue had to do with payments and bonus payments that he gave to people without approval, including himself. So I'm just reading a couple of excerpts from this report that we paid a lot of money for. It says, in response to the right to know request, the board discovered that Bayshore had paid out to exempt staff, department heads, and supervisors almost $600,000 over several years in lump sum payments or merit bonuses without ever specifically disclosing his intent to make those payments to the board and without obtaining any board approval. In fact, Bayshore expressly denied that he had approved any bonuses to be paid in 2008 at a public board meeting on December 15, 2008, when he later discounted as being nervous or misspeaking. It goes on to say he paid himself approximately $146,000 in lump sum payments without disclosure nor board approval. In short, while he said that he misspoke, we do not believe that a seasoned budget analyst and township manager, or even a first-time accounting student, would not know that it was his sworn ethical fiduciary duty to comply with the law and to present to the board all compensation he intended to take and receive so that the board consider it and approve it. So here it's black and white. He knowingly took money. He knowingly gave money to his managers without approval. He knowingly tried to change the employee manual so that he could come up with an ordinance, which he didn't, to change the law. But yet we're stuck with this $3.8 million, which he secretly kept on his computer. So everybody who for years was saying, there's nothing we're hiding. Well, there was a lot that we were hiding, millions and millions of dollars. Lastly, and I believe the fundamental problem with the entire problem that happened with Mr. Bayshore was the signing of Mr. Bayshore's employment contract. Mr. Bayshore wrote his own employment contract. He said he wrote it. And Mr. Blake, who he paid money to, again, without authorization, which it says in here. So Mr. Blake was the solicitor who, in theory, was in charge of protecting the taxpayers, yet he wasn't doing that. He wasn't going and giving good legal counsel. He was only protecting his money that he was getting from Mr. Bayshore. So in 2000, when Mr. Bayshore was first hired, he had this really generous employment contract. And if you wanted to give him an employment contract that was generous, you had every right to do that. You could do anything you want. It said, among other things, some people may or may not know this, that he got $175,000 to buy his house. So, it also clearly states that no employment contract, or in fact any contract, can ever be signed that's over $3,000 without full public disclosure. So, but that did happen, and Commissioner Mahoney, Commissioner Pierce, and Solicitor Blake, all three attorneys signed his contract. Three attorneys who should have known their fiduciary responsibility to go and disclose that to the public and to the other commissioners. I know Commissioner Paolino said she had never seen it. Commissioner Cannon said he had never seen it. And regardless of if they had seen it, I never saw it. And I, as a member of the public, deserve to see it. So, I go back to a conversation we had a month ago, which was Mr. Bayshore is now suing the township. And Mr. Bayshore needs information. He needs to know what's going on. He needs to know what's happening. So Mr. Bayshore calls some of his friends from the inner circle and says he wants to get together for a vacation. Mr. Granger knowingly and correctly had notified all the managers and said to all the managers, do not meet with Bayshore, do not talk to Bayshore, we're under litigation. Your allegiance must be to the taxpayers. And what happened? Three of those managers, Mr. Loper went, Mr. Blake went, Mr. Malloy, thank you, and Mr. Blumstrom all went to meet with him. Now, fortunately, 2 of those are no longer with us. I think it's inexcusable that you folks did not terminate the other 2 people. Where is the allegiance? What do we need to do to go and say, you need to care about us, the taxpayers? You need to stop protecting the inner circle. The inner circle took money that they weren't authorized to take. You guys weren't watching the House. Not all of you guys, some of you guys. Mr. Mahoney, it doesn't make sense to me, such a prestigious and talented attorney, why you would sign a document and not have it out in the public. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Would you like me to respond to that?
Sure.
When the matter was scheduled, it was scheduled by Commissioner Pierce as president of this board, and it was scheduled in executive session. Solicitor Blake obviously passed on it, meaning he gave it his blessing, and it came before the board in executive session, and it was never raised as an issue. I think in retrospect, and I've acknowledged this publicly, and I've apologized for it, that the matter should have been done in a public meeting. It wasn't, but that does not affect the fact that that was an arm's length negotiated transaction between the board and Mr. Bayshore. We can go through all the history of who knew what, when, and where. The fact of the matter is that I had nothing to do with scheduling this. I had nothing to do with passing on whether it should be in a public meeting or an executive meeting. It just came to us in executive session, and we approved it. And the only reason I signed it is because the agreement says it's going to be signed by the president and the vice president. I was vice president. I signed it. I'm not, and I know that you're trying to paint this picture, which includes me in it, and I've accepted my responsibility for certain things that I think I should have done differently. But becoming president of this board does not mean you're omniscient. I don't know everything. This is a part-time position for me. And believe me, I've worked really hard. When the heavy lifting occurred this year, I could have gone away. I didn't. I've worked very hard to try and put into place a new administration, which we're still in the process of doing. And I've already explained publicly why I did certain things. I obviously it doesn't satisfy you, and I can't help that. But as far as the signing of that thing, I've explained it once, and that's all I can do.
I understand it doesn't make you omniscient. The Home Rule Charter is 25 pages, and it basically says in there, anything over $3,000, you need to get approved in public. Any contract in excess of $3,000. I would hope that everyone would take the time to just read that. Secondly, year after year, the auditors came to you and said that this was something that needed to be disclosed, and year after year, you signed it saying you did not want it disclosed. You mentioned in a prior meeting the reason you wanted it not disclosed.
I didn't mention it. I explained it in great detail.
You did.
Why I did it.
Right, you did. And you explained that you didn't read the whole document, which didn't make any sense either because you're a smart attorney, and I don't know why you would. That doesn't make sense. A smart attorney and a person on this board has to rely upon staff to do the things that we don't have the time to do. And I did rely upon my staff. I relied upon my manager, and I relied upon my finance director, whether it was Amy Cuthbertson, whose signature was on several of those reports, or David Fiorenza before that. I relied upon them to tell me that everything in that document was true, accurate, and correct. And if I made a mistake, it was placing my trust in those individuals. Again, I can appreciate what you're saying, but there were warning signs. There were alarm bells. There were times that we came before this board. I came before this board from 2006 on saying, hey, he's not releasing credit card information. Hey, we're not, the treasurer wants information on bonuses and salaries. And you blocked that, Mr. Mahoney.
No.
You protected, in my view, there was an awful lot of protection of a man who we now see in writing. We spent $100,000 to know that this man lied to us. He lied to you. He lied to lots of different people. He lied. He did a lot of really bad things. It says it in here.
I agree with you that if you believe everything in that report, that he did lie to us, and he did lie to me. But the fact of the matter is, as I said before, I'm not omniscient. I put my trust in the staff, and unfortunately, in this particular instance, it was a trust which was misplaced. And I've said that, I've acknowledged it, but that's as far as it goes.
My point in
And let me
Yeah,
make one
sure.
other point. For the years that you've been coming before this board, I was the one individual on this board who always insisted that you be given as much time as you want to question us, and we tried as best we could to give you answers. You may not have liked them, but I never tried to block your right to do that, even though there were many people on this board who said to me, why do you give that woman so much time? And I said, because she's got a constitutional right, as far as I'm concerned, and a right under the charter to have her say. And I don't think you can say that I didn't give you that opportunity.
You absolutely gave me that opportunity, but also at the same time, and I don't know who was behind this or responsible for this, but at the same time when I was coming forward and asking and disclosing information that I thought was inappropriate, I then got my business audited. And I think it's quite clear based on all the evidence and things that happened was that this audit, and we don't know who was behind this audit, but there was what seems like a very unfair audit of my business and some other people who were whistleblowers. So was that Mr. Bayshore by himself? I don't know. We also know that this was another warning bell. Mr. Fiorenza all of a sudden was let go. Well, Mr. Fiorenza, as we now learned, was also given some information, and there's other things coming out about Mr. Fiorenza and his contract, and he was given money to not talk. These are warning bells. I bring them all up because, one, if we don't talk about them, we'll never learn from it and we'll never change. Two, we need to change some of our practices. Like we kept saying, let's change accounting firms. Let's have independent, unattached solicitors who are not part of any. We need to get out of our inner circle. We need independent auditors. I can't tell you how many times Ms. Palino would say, let's get an independent auditor. And then somebody else would go and say, usually Mr. Hervada, we have a lot of independence. Well, Mr. Hervada was in charge of the finance committee and never had a finance meeting. Maybe if we had finance meetings, we would have been able to address these issues. And I'm sorry, but this board has the same blame. You know, this board was supposed to have finance meetings so that we're not into September and we haven't done anything and we've blown this whole year about accumulating money. So this board is not without blame as well. So lastly, I just would say that I would ask this board to use the information we learned and to reconsider terminating the employees who again violated the trust of our township employees. Ms. Cuthbertson, one of the true kind of silent heroes in my opinion, she worked really hard to try and change things. When she learned and found out, it says in this report, if anybody reads it, when she learned and found out that Mr. Bayshore was hiding this information, she immediately made him take it off his computer and put it on the main computer, so that this information would become public. So she tried really hard, and then when she's trying to decide if she should keep this job or not take the job, she goes and finds out that half the managers she worked with are going off to meet with Bayshore for some secret meeting. I mean, come on, who wants to work in that environment? It's time to start new. And I ask you, please, to have the courage to say, let's look at these ugly details, learn from it, and make some changes. And, you know, I'm sorry you're not here to push for those changes, because we could use your voice of strength. So, anyway, thank you all. Good night.
Hi, Baron Gemmer, South Wayne. I have a number of items, but I'll be very brief on each of them. First off, I'd like to thank Commissioner Fisher for taking on the trap, neuter, and release project for Garrett Hill instead of the trapping that was originally planned. I'm not going to ask for an update, but I just hope that we can get more visibility for that, so if it occurs in other parts of the township, that we can implement something similar to that.
I really can't take credit for that, but John Ruddy worked with Len Donato and a volunteer group to trap cats, feral cats. I was involved, but I didn't personally do any of the work, so.
Well, you got it wrong. Thank you, Commissioner Ruddy, then, Superintendent Ruddy, for that also, then. And again, if we can get an update sometime so people can get visibility, that would be great. Second item, given that last meeting was 5 hours and this one's probably going to be pushing 4, and I know the budget may look a little rosier, heard what we've said, but next summer we might be up against the same thing. We might want to consider some modification to the summer schedule. I know it's sacred, but just something to consider so that we don't have these long meetings where people kind of get drained at the end. The last, I have 4 other items that have to do with process now. And when I'm going to comment on them, I'm not commenting on whether I disagree or agree with the results. They're more in the vein of transparency and letting the public participate, as well as protecting the township from some things we might have missteps on. The first one has to do, going back to the June meeting when we were at the firehouse. There was one of the points I brought up is, well, when are we going to start talking about the budget things? And we said, well, the trash is going to be talked about in July. We have that down. And that was good. We're moving down that path. I guess one of the things that surprised me is the personnel discussion that took place in executive session that resulted in the layoffs. And to me, whether it's layoffs or furloughs, as Commissioner Fisher suggested, or the rear yard pickup or other things, those are all part of the discussion, and I would have hoped that even layoffs, as a general discussion, not specific folks, would have been talked about to let public have input on that, just like we're having input on all the other budget items. So that's one thing I'll say on that. Secondly, with the layoffs themselves, per the Sunshine Law, this is more a protection of the township. I don't know if there were additional people besides those that were laid off that were talked about in the meetings, but I believe that because we didn't know about the meeting until it was announced at the commissioners' meeting right before the executive meeting, that perhaps some of the employees weren't notified that they were going to be the focus of a discussion at the executive session. And per the Sunshine Law, they have the right to ask that be in public. So if they weren't notified, you were taking away their right to request in writing to have that discussion take place in public. All personnel issues, you have the right to have a personnel discussion in private, provided the person doesn't want it in public. If they want it in public, it has to be in public. So I don't know the circumstances of that. I'm just saying, let's please be careful with that. We don't want something like that coming back to bite us, where they could say, my rights were violated under the Sunshine Law. I didn't have a chance to air this in public. Per the layoffs too, then, the question I have on, there were two department heads, Mr. Loper and Ms. Ostrander were laid off as part of that discussion, is my understanding. And both the code and the charter talk about department heads shall be appointed, suspended, or removed by the manager, subject to approval by the board, as provided in 503 of the chapter. And 503 is powers and duties. Appoint and for stated cause, suspend or remove department heads or other township employees under the manager's direct and general supervision, subject, however, to formal approval by a majority vote of the total membership of the board when required by the charter. And it talks about that. So that, and just to level set everyone, executive session, you can talk. It's a discussion point about these, whether it's real estate or whether it's personnel. But any actions have to take place, both per the Sunshine Law as well as our own charter, in a regular or special meeting being one that, like, you might call for the bonds, as opposed to an executive session. So the layoff section is a little unclear in terms of how it might apply to department heads, but I would submit that if you read this, that it probably was not the intention that layoffs could be done of department heads without approval by the board. So one of the questions I would have is, again, to protect the township, that might be something you need to revisit in a formal vote at a regular meeting or a special meeting, but more likely a regular meeting. And that's actually more applicable to where it's very clear cut. And again, I know that there's not been confirmation other than Sam Strike's story about the suspensions of the two department heads for their trip. But that's very clear cut. When you get the suspensions, it specifically says again that needs to be subject to approval. And so that needs to take place in a public forum. If you read both the code and the Home Rule Charter, there's no question about that. So again, there's been no confirmation from anyone here that the suspensions has taken place. But if they have, that vote basically is void, very similar to what we're talking about the contract for Mr. Bayshore. That can't take place in executive session. Votes like that cannot take place in executive session. So hopefully that was brief enough. I thank you for your time.
Chip Layfield, Wayne. A couple things I think you guys did right. I agree completely with Christina's remarks as far as institutionalizing the Neil Morris report. But really, seriously, as a citizen, someone that's been in the community watching this board for some time, I was surprised that the report was as honest as it was. And I know that's because that's what you asked for. And I think that's a significant gift to the community, so that we have, a foundation on which to build. And I know a lot of you aren't going to be here, but hopefully the new commissioners will see what a benefit that is to actually look at the situation honestly and authentically. And hopefully the auditor's report will flesh out other aspects of it. But yeah, I know those reports sometimes go the way you want them to go, and I would imagine that didn't go the way you wanted it to go 100%. And I was pleased it was released to the public as you said it would be, and I think you deserve a lot of credit for that. Another good thing I thought you did was the meeting we had at the firehouse 2 meetings ago. I thought that was absolutely awesome. You guys being there and the volunteers, it was humbling to hear the decades of time some of the people put in, and I really hope that becomes something that you do every year. I think it gives a good context to what that firehouse is, because we drive by, we don't really see it. We see the fire engines, and maybe because I was there, I don't know. But I thought it was a really beneficial thing. And then finally for Lisa, congratulations. And I'm someone that's been very critical of your absences at this meeting, letters to the editor, my blog, where I do use my name. But I remember when you first came on the board, and 10 years ago, and I'm here tonight when you're leaving, and you have been a dynamo, and you can see it tonight that when you're here and you participate, you're a catalyst, and you can benefit the entire community, and I thank you for that.
My name is Beth Tredenik. I've been employed by the Radnor Township Police Department for over 20 years. I had planned on attending the April meeting during which Dave Bayshore defended his actions. However, I was unable to do so due to sudden illness. I had planned on confronting Mr. Bayshore with a few questions about decisions he had made regarding my employment. I'm here tonight to tell you the reasons I planned on confronting Mr. Bayshore and to give you, the commissioners, as well as the residents, an idea what it has been like from an employee's point of view to go through this financial mess caused by Mr. Bayshore. For the first 17 years of my employment, I was a police dispatcher, a job which I loved doing and had expected to do until I retired. My job as a dispatcher came to a sudden and unexpected end when on December 27, 2005, myself and the 3 other dispatchers were advised by Mr. Bayshore that as of December 26th, our jobs no longer existed and our employment with Radnor Township was terminated, since dispatching duties would be transferred to the Delaware County Radio Room. We were given only 1 month's severance pay and 3 months of continued medical benefits. We were also advised there would be 2 jobs available in January and that the 4 of us were welcome to apply for them. Approximately 4 weeks later, I was hired back as a call taker for the police department, and Bill Gallagher was hired back as the ordinance enforcement officer. When Bill and I were hired back, our salaries were cut by approximately $12,000, even though we continued to use much of the knowledge acquired from our many years as dispatchers. The transfer of dispatching duties did not actually take place until mid-February. Until the transfer, I continued to dispatch during the day with other shifts filled in by police officers. The first question I plan to ask Mr. Bayshore is why he laid us off instead of giving us notice of the impending transfer to Delcom. Every other police department in the area gave their dispatchers 6 to 12 months' notice before closing their radio rooms. The transfer to Delcom was apparently done so quickly in order to alleviate financial problems for the township. by eliminating 4 salaries, as well as the cost of required upgrades to the police radio system. I find it extremely unconscionable and maddening that less than 3 months later, on March 2nd, 2006, Dave Bayshore would hand out a total of $102,000 in bonuses to other employees, including $17,000 to himself. My second question to Mr. Bayshore is, if the township was so financially stressed in 2005, why would you hand out outrageously high bonuses, if any at all, in 2006, 7, and 8, after letting go of 4 hard-working, dedicated employees? I would also like to know the criteria to receive such a generous bonus payment. Why were only managers, directors, supervisors, specialists, and a secretary or 2 the only ones eligible to receive a bonus? What would warrant one to receive a bonus in the amount of $10,500 after only 2 years of employment, or to receive a total of $20,000 to $30,000 in 4 years? If there was that much money available to be given out, why wasn't every employee eligible? I suspect the old boys club mentality existed and that the bonus money was only for personal friends of Mr. Bayshore. I had to laugh at the February Commissioners meeting when Mr. Masterson asked Mr. Bayshore if any bonus payments had been made or scheduled in 2009, to which he replied no. There is no doubt in my mind that if the bonus payments had not become public knowledge, the payments would have continued to be made to a chosen few, whether they deserved them or not. I know the payments were a well-guarded secret because in the 20-plus years I've worked here, I never had heard about them. After the more than generous retirement package was offered in 2007, and 20-some employees took advantage of it, several job openings became available. In August of 2007, I was approached by Amanda Ostrander on behalf of Mr. Bayshore. Due to my skills of dealing with the public, I was asked to take on the job of Township receptionist, in addition to continuing my job as call taker for the police department. I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to recoup at least some of the $12,000 pay cut I had to take, and was surprised and insulted when Mr. Bayshore offered me only $1,900 increase in salary to do both jobs. Since the township receptionist job had been posted with a salary of $30,000, and the previous receptionist reportedly received in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $60,000, I asked for a raise of only $10,000 to do both jobs. This still would have saved the township $20,000 plus the cost of benefits each year. Mr. Bayshore then made a counteroffer of $5,600 and told me I had time to think about it, since we had several weeks left before moving into the new building. For reasons unbeknownst to me, interviews began for the township receptionist position. Before I could reply to Mr. Bayshore's last offer, I was unable to contact Mr. Bayshore and never got an answer. As a result, a receptionist was hired at a cost of $30,000 plus benefits. I find it puzzling why Mr. Bayshore wouldn't have wanted to save the township over $20,000 a year, especially since it was his idea to combine both jobs. I also find it insulting that he would originally offer me only $1,900 to do 2 jobs and then turn around and hand out thousands of dollars in bonuses, including some as high as $10,500 to employees with only 2 years of service to the township. After the retirements, several of the available jobs were posted with a salary of $30,000. A few current employees thought about transferring to other job positions, but were told they would have to take a pay cut to the posted $30,000 salary. Recently, the salaries of all employees were posted on the township website for the years 2007, 8, and 9. In reviewing the 3 years, it was discovered that several brand-new employees were given thousands of dollars more, some as much as $14,000 more than the posted $30,000. Why would an employee who has served the township for many years have to take a pay cut when a brand-new employee would be given thousands of dollars more than the posted salary from the start? Employees who wanted to transfer should have been allowed to do so without taking a pay cut. There's no rhyme or reason how salaries were determined or how money was given out by Mr. Bayshore. There needs to be some fairness in the determination of salaries. When sending out emails, Mr. Bayshore always addressed them to Team Radnor. Frankly, I always wondered what team he was talking about. Recently, there have been discussions of furloughs for township employees of 1 day per pay period. This will mean a loss of several $100s per month, something I personally can't afford. So I'm asking if they have to do furloughs, ask for volunteers, because there are actually a few people that would volunteer. It will be up to you and the attorneys to determine whether or not Mr. Bayshore's actions were illegal. I sometimes wonder if ego and arrogance took over when he was promoted to township manager. Year after year, he took care of a chosen few, some of whom are personal friends, without any regard to other township employees, or most of all, without any regard to township taxpayers. In closing, I would like to remind you, the commissioners, as well as the township residents, that there is a human side to this financial mess the township is in. It was very upsetting to watch 12 fellow employees lose their jobs and be escorted out of the building as though they had committed a crime. We all wonder if there will be more layoffs, and if so, who will go and when. In a place once named the best place to work, morale is at an all-time low, and trust among those of us left behind is lacking or even non-existent. As a result, ugly rumors run rampant, and without merit get posted in blogs and/or newspapers. Even so, through all the upset and stress, those of us still employed continue to provide courteous and professional service to residents and non-residents alike. I hope that you will all remember the employees did not cause the existing problems we all face at this time. Thank you.
Any other public participation?
Yes. My name is Jim Schneller. I'm a resident. I wanted to ask if there was any investigation made of whether, A, the insurance policy of this township provides for payment of funds misused by the manager. And I'm speaking about the severance pays, especially in light of all the economic difficulties we're now having, which I think are based in great part by the fact that these monies are gone. And second of all, because Mr. Bayshore has filed suit, I'm wondering also, is there any chance the township can file suit of some quiet type to gain reimbursement of these severances and vacation pays? Has anyone looked into that?
I'll let Mr. Rice respond if he cares to.
The township has had several conversations with the insurance broker, and he's put all the insurance carriers on notice that there are potential claims. The dollar amounts have not yet been established. They've asked for additional information. We are in the process of providing that to them.
Oh, thank you. I really hope that could be looked at, because it would be a great solution for some large chunk.
Okay. Is there a motion to
Move we adjourn?
All those in favor? Okay.